Welcome to this journey of understanding life's natural flow and discovering the foundation of inner peace that lies within each of us. Throughout history, Zen masters have taught that the path to true contentment is not found in fighting against the currents of existence, but in learning to move with them gracefully, like a leaf floating downstream on a gentle river. This ancient wisdom speaks to something deep within our souls, something that recognizes the futility of constant struggle and yearns for a more harmonious way of being. Imagine for a moment that you are standing beside a flowing river on a quiet morning, when the mist still clings to the water's surface. The water moves with effortless grace, never forcing its way through obstacles, but instead finding the most natural path around them. Each drop of water seems to know exactly where it belongs in the greater flow, contributing to the river's journey without resistance or complaint. When the river encounters rocks, it does not crash against them in frustration or anger. Instead, it flows around them, over them, sometimes even wearing them smooth through patient persistence over countless years. This river teaches us something profound about the nature of existence itself and how we might learn to navigate our own lives with similar wisdom and ease. The river's journey began perhaps as a tiny spring high in the mountains, where water first emerged from deep within the earth. From that humble beginning, it has grown and evolved, gathering strength from tributaries, carving its channel through valleys, creating ecosystems and supporting life along its banks. At no point in this journey has the river questioned its path or wished it were flowing in a different direction. It simply responds to the landscape before it, finding the way forward that requires the least resistance while still maintaining its essential nature and purpose. Life, much like this river, has its own natural timing and rhythm that operates according to principles far more complex and intelligent than our limited human perspective can fully comprehend. There are seasons of rapid flow when events unfold quickly and opportunities seem to rush toward us like spring waters swollen with melting snow. During these periods, we may feel swept along by circumstances, barely able to keep up with the pace of change and growth. These are times of expansion, learning, and dynamic engagement with the world around us. There are also times of gentle meandering, when progress feels slow, and we might wonder if we are moving forward at all. These quieter periods can feel frustrating to our goal-oriented minds, which prefer visible progress and measurable achievements. Yet these slower phases serve essential purposes in our development. They provide time for integration, reflection, and the deep inner work that cannot be rushed. They allow us to consolidate the lessons we have learned during more active periods and to prepare for whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead. Both of these phases are equally important and equally natural, just as both the rushing rapids and the peaceful pools serve essential functions in the river's ecosystem. The Zen masters understood that fighting against these natural rhythms only creates suffering, while learning to trust and flow with them brings a deep sense of peace and alignment with the fundamental forces that govern all existence. When we observe the river more closely, we notice that it never hurries unnecessarily, yet it always reaches its destination. The river does not wake up each morning worried about whether it will make it to the ocean. It does not spend energy comparing its progress to other rivers or wishing it could flow faster or slower. The river exists in a state of perfect trust in its own process, confident that each moment's response to immediate conditions will contribute to its ultimate purpose. The river does not waste energy worrying about the obstacles downstream that it has not yet encountered. It does not spend time regretting the path it has already traveled or wishing it had taken a different route through the landscape behind it. The river exists fully in each moment, responding to the immediate landscape before it with perfect presence and adaptability. This quality of presence, this ability to be fully engaged with what is happening right now, rather than being lost in thoughts of past or future, is one of the most fundamental teachings we can learn from nature. This present moment awareness is not a passive state, but rather a dynamic responsiveness that allows for the most appropriate action in each situation. When the river encounters a steep drop, it becomes a waterfall, transforming potential energy into kinetic energy with grace and power. When it meets a wide valley, it spreads out and slows down, creating marshlands and wetlands that support diverse forms of life. The river's ability to change its form and behavior while maintaining its essential identity offers us a profound model for how we might navigate the varying conditions of our own lives. The ancient Zen masters spent countless hours observing natural phenomena like rivers, mountains, trees, and seasons because they recognized that nature operates according to principles that, when understood and embodied, can guide us toward a more harmonious way of living. They saw that everything in the natural world follows certain patterns and rhythms that reflect deeper truths about the nature of existence itself. These patterns are not random or chaotic, but rather express an underlying intelligence, an order that governs all manifestation. They noticed that nature never wastes energy fighting against itself. The mountain does not resist the wind and weather that gradually shape its contours. The ocean does not struggle against the moon's gravitational pull that creates the tides. The seasons follow their eternal cycle without complaint or resistance. This natural acceptance of what is, combined with appropriate responsiveness to changing conditions, creates a harmony and efficiency that human beings can learn to emulate in their own lives. Consider how a tree grows and develops over the course of its lifetime. It does not force its branches to extend in directions that would weaken its structure or compromise its stability. It does not demand that spring arrive earlier than its natural time, or that autumn delay its arrival. The tree simply responds to the conditions around it with remarkable intelligence and adaptability. It grows toward light, seeking the energy it needs for photosynthesis. It extends its roots toward water and nutrients, sometimes traveling great distances underground to find what it needs. It sheds its leaves when the season calls for dormancy, conserving energy for the renewal that will come with spring's return. In this natural responsiveness, the tree finds both strength and flexibility. It can bend in strong winds without breaking, because it has learned to yield when necessary while maintaining its essential nature and integrity. The tree that tries to resist the wind completely will often snap under pressure, while the tree that has learned the art of flexible strength can survive storms that would destroy more rigid structures. This same principle applies to human life in countless ways that become apparent when we begin to observe our own patterns and reactions with the same careful attention the Zen masters brought to their study of natural phenomena. When we learn to trust life's natural timing, we discover that many of the things we worry about, rush toward, or desperately try to control have their own organic timeline that often serves us better than our impatient desires and anxious demands. The job opportunity that seemed to slip away may have cleared the path for something even more suitable to our true talents and deeper aspirations. At the time, the loss may have felt devastating, triggering fears about our worth and our future security. But with the perspective that comes from trusting life's timing, we may later see that this apparent setback was actually a redirection toward work that brings greater fulfillment and aligns more closely with our authentic values and interests. The relationship that ended painfully may have been preparing us for deeper love and understanding, both of ourselves and of what we truly seek in intimate connection with another person. The heartbreak that felt so overwhelming may have cracked open our hearts in a way that allows for greater compassion and empathy. The period of solitude that followed may have provided essential time for healing old wounds and developing a stronger sense of our own identity and worth. The financial challenge that felt overwhelming may have been teaching us valuable lessons about resourcefulness, priorities, and what truly matters for our well-being and happiness. The stress of financial uncertainty may have motivated us to develop new skills, explore different career paths, or discover creative solutions we never would have considered during times of abundance. The experience of having less may have shown us how much we can actually live without, and how many of our perceived needs are actually wants driven by social conditioning rather than genuine necessity. These examples illustrate how life's apparent obstacles and setbacks often serve purposes that only become clear with time and perspective. The Zen masters taught that this hidden intelligence in life's unfolding is always present, even when we cannot see it clearly from our limited vantage point. Learning to trust this intelligence requires developing faith in the fundamental benevolence of existence itself, even during periods when circumstances feel challenging or unclear. Trusting life's natural timing does not mean becoming passive or abandoning all effort and intention. This is a common misunderstanding that can lead to spiritual bypassing or using spiritual concepts to avoid taking responsibility for our lives. Rather, trusting life timing means learning to distinguish between skillful action and anxious forcing, between appropriate effort and desperate striving, between healthy planning and obsessive control. When we act from a place of trust and alignment with natural principles, our efforts become more effective and less exhausting. We learn to recognize when conditions are ripe for action and when patience is called for. We develop sensitivity to the natural rhythms of our own energy and creativity, working with our natural cycles rather than against them. We learn to plant seeds at the right season, water them appropriately with consistent but not overwhelming attention, and then allow the natural processes of growth to unfold without constantly digging them up to check on their progress. This approach to action and effort is like learning to sail rather than trying to power through every situation with brute force. The skilled sailor does not fight against the wind, but learns to work with it, adjusting the sails and the boat's direction to harness the wind's power for forward movement. Sometimes this means tacking back and forth, rather than heading directly toward the destination. But this indirect approach often proves faster and more efficient than trying to motor straight ahead against opposing forces. The Zen masters taught that this trust in natural timing is closely connected to our understanding of impermanence, one of the fundamental characteristics of all existence. Everything in the manifest world is constantly changing, constantly in flow, never remaining exactly the same from one moment to the next. The river never contains exactly the same water from one moment to the next, yet we still recognize it as the same river. The mountain, despite appearing solid and unchanging to our limited perception, is slowly being shaped by wind and weather, erosion and geological forces over countless years. Our own bodies are replacing cells continuously, completely renewing themselves every 7 years or so, yet we maintain a sense of continuity and identity throughout these changes. Our thoughts arise and pass away moment by moment like clouds forming and dissolving in the sky of consciousness. Our emotions flow through us like weather patterns across the landscape of awareness, sometimes stormy and intense, sometimes calm and clear, but always temporary and always changing. When we truly understand impermanence at a deep level, not just intellectually, but experientially, we begin to see that many of our struggles come from trying to make permanent what is naturally temporary, or trying to rush what needs time to develop properly, according to its own internal schedule. We suffer when we grasp too tightly to pleasant experiences, trying to make them last forever and becoming anxious when we sense them beginning to fade. We also suffer when we resist unpleasant experiences, fighting against their presence instead of understanding that they too are temporary visitors in the guest house of our consciousness and often carry important messages or opportunities for growth and learning. This resistance to impermanence shows up in countless ways in our daily lives. We may cling to a job that no longer challenges or fulfills us because we fear the uncertainty of change. We may stay in relationships that have grown stagnant or unhealthy because the familiar dysfunction feels safer than the unknown possibilities that might emerge from honest communication or necessary endings. We may hold on to possessions, habits, beliefs, or identities that no longer serve us because letting go feels like losing something essential about ourselves. The river teaches us about impermanence in a very direct and immediate way. We can never step into the same river twice because the water is always moving, always changing, always flowing toward its destination. Yet the river itself continues, maintaining its essential character and fulfilling its purpose while being completely different in each moment. This paradox of continuity within constant change is one of the deepest insights we can gain about the nature of existence and our place within it. This understanding helps us recognize that what we think of as our self is much more like a river than like a solid object. Our identity, our personality, our beliefs, our preferences, our relationships, our circumstances are all constantly flowing and changing. Yet something essential continues throughout all these changes. The Zen masters pointed to this unchanging awareness that witnesses all change as our true nature, the aspect of ourselves that remains constant, even as everything else transforms around us and within us. Learning to flow like the river means developing what the Zen masters called beginner's mind, an attitude of openness, curiosity, and willingness to meet each moment freshly, rather than through the filter of our preconceptions and expectations. Beginner's mind approaches each situation as if encountering it for the first time, free from the assumptions and judgments that can blind us to new possibilities and creative solutions. When we approach life with beginner's mind, we become more adaptable, more responsive to what is actually happening, rather than what we think should be happening based on our past experiences or future expectations. We become like water, able to take the shape of whatever container we find ourselves in, while never losing our essential nature and inherent qualities. Water remains water whether it is in a glass, a river, or a cloud, yet it adapts completely to each form and situation. This flexibility and adaptability become especially important during times of transition and uncertainty, periods when the familiar structures and routines of our lives are shifting or dissolving entirely. Just as the river must navigate around fallen trees, through narrow passages, and over unexpected drops in elevation, we too encounter obstacles and changes in our life's landscape that require us to find new ways of moving forward. During major life transitions such as career changes, relationship endings, health challenges, or the death of loved ones, we may feel like we are navigating completely unfamiliar territory without a reliable map or guide. The strategies and approaches that worked in previous situations may no longer be effective. The identity and roles that once defined us may no longer fit our new circumstances. The future that we had planned and prepared for may no longer be possible or desirable. These periods of major transition, while often uncomfortable and disorienting, are also opportunities for profound growth and renewal. When the old patterns and structures fall away, space is created for new possibilities to emerge that we might never have discovered if we had remained in our familiar routines and comfort zones. The career that ended unexpectedly may lead to work that is more aligned with our authentic interests and values. The relationship that concluded may make room for deeper love and connection, either with a new partner or with ourselves. The health challenge that forced us to slow down may teach us important lessons about what truly matters in life and how to live with greater presence and appreciation. When we trust in our ability to adapt and flow, these challenges become opportunities to discover new strengths and capabilities we might never have known we possessed. We may find that we are more resilient than we thought, more creative in finding solutions, more capable of starting over and building something new from the ground up. We may discover talents and interests that were dormant during our more settled periods, or develop qualities of character that only emerge under pressure and uncertainty. The practice of trusting life's natural timing also involves learning to recognize and work with cycles, both in the natural world around us and in our own personal experience. Nature operates in cycles that reflect deep patterns of renewal and regeneration, the cycle of seasons, the cycle of day and night, the cycle of tides, the cycle of birth, growth, maturity, decay, death, and rebirth. These cycles are not random, but follow predictable patterns that have remained consistent for millions of years. Our lives also follow cyclical patterns, though we often fail to recognize or honor them in our culture's emphasis on constant growth, productivity, and forward movement. There are times for action and times for rest, times for expansion and times for consolidation, times for engagement with the world, and times for inner reflection and renewal. There are cycles of creativity and dormancy, cycles of relationship and solitude, cycles of learning and integration. When we learn to recognize these natural cycles in our own lives, we can work with them rather than against them, maximizing our effectiveness and minimizing unnecessary stress and exhaustion. We can push forward during times of natural expansion, when our energy is high and opportunities are abundant. We can allow ourselves to rest and recharge during times of natural contraction, when our systems need time to process and integrate recent experiences. We can plant new projects during our personal spring seasons, when creativity and optimism are naturally high. We can harvest the results of our efforts During our autumn phases, when the fruits of our labor are ready to be gathered and shared, we can use our winter periods for reflection, planning, and the deep inner work that prepares us for the next cycle of growth and expansion. This cyclical awareness helps us avoid the exhaustion and burnout that come from trying to maintain the same level of activity and intensity all the time. It also helps us develop patience during slower periods, understanding that these phases serve essential purposes in our overall development and are not signs of failure or stagnation. The Zen masters understood that one of the greatest obstacles to trusting life's natural flow is our tendency to live primarily in our thoughts rather than in direct, immediate experience of the present moment. When we are caught up in mental commentary about what is happening, worrying about what might happen in the future, or rehashing what has already occurred in the past, we lose touch with the immediate reality of the present moment where life is actually unfolding and where our real power to respond and influence our experience actually exists. The river does not think about flowing. It simply flows in response to the immediate conditions it encounters. The tree does not worry about growing. It simply grows by responding moment by moment to the light, water, nutrients, and other conditions in its environment. Animals in the wild do not spend time regretting past decisions or anxiously planning for future scenarios. They remain alert and responsive to the present moment where both danger and opportunity actually exist. This quality of immediate presence and responsiveness is our natural state as human beings, but it often becomes obscured by the constant activity of our thinking minds. We have developed the remarkable capacity for abstract thought, planning, and imagination, which serves us well in many situations. However, when this mental activity becomes compulsive and disconnected from present moment awareness, it can become a source of suffering rather than a useful tool. Developing trust in life's natural timing requires us to cultivate a more direct, immediate relationship with our experience that balances our thinking capacity with other forms of knowing and perception. This means learning to feel our way forward as much as thinking our way forward, paying attention to our intuition, our body's wisdom, and the subtle signals that life sends us about when to move forward and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to hold on and when to let go. Our bodies are constantly receiving and processing information about our environment and our internal state through our senses, our nervous system, and subtle energetic awareness that operates below the threshold of conscious thought. This bodily intelligence often knows things that our thinking minds have not yet figured out. We may feel drawn to a particular person, place, or opportunity without being able to explain why rationally. We may sense that something is not quite right in a situation, even when everything appears fine on the surface. We may feel a sudden urge to call a friend, take a different route home, or change our plans in ways that later prove to be exactly what was needed. This intuitive way of navigating life does not replace careful thought and planning, but it adds another dimension to our decision-making process that can provide valuable guidance, especially in situations where we lack sufficient information to make purely rational decisions. Just as the river uses both the force of gravity and the feedback it receives from the landscape to find its path, we can learn to use both our rational minds and our deeper wisdom to navigate the complexities of human existence. Learning to trust and follow our intuitive guidance requires developing sensitivity to subtle inner signals and the courage to act on this guidance, even when it does not make complete logical sense. This is often challenging in our culture, which tends to value rational analysis over intuitive knowing. However, many of the most successful and fulfilled people in all fields of endeavor report that their most important decisions were guided by intuition rather than purely logical analysis. As we deepen our trust in life's natural timing, we often discover that what seemed like delays or obstacles were actually perfectly timed preparations for what was to come. The period of waiting that felt so frustrating may have been exactly what we needed to develop the patience and inner strength required for the next phase of our journey. The skills we were forced to develop during a difficult period may prove essential for opportunities that arise later. The connections we made during an unexpected detour may become crucial resources for future endeavors. The detour that seemed to take us away from our goals may have led us to encounters and experiences that proved invaluable in ways we could never have anticipated when we were focused only on our original destination. The person we met during a delayed flight may become a lifelong friend or business partner. The class we took while waiting for our preferred program to become available may introduce us to interests and abilities we never knew we had. The job we accepted reluctantly while looking for something better may provide exactly the experience and connections we need for our ultimate career path. This perspective shift from seeing delays and obstacles as problems to seeing them as part of life's intelligent unfolding is one of the most liberating insights we can develop. It does not mean that we become passive or stop working toward our goals and dreams, but rather that we learn to hold our goals lightly, remaining open to the possibility that life may have something even better in store for us than what we originally envisioned. This openness to unexpected possibilities requires a fundamental shift in our relationship with control and certainty. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that we should know exactly what we want and then pursue it with single-minded determination until we achieve it. While focus and persistence certainly have their place, this approach can also blind us to opportunities and possibilities that do not fit our predetermined plans. The river's journey from mountain spring to ocean encompasses countless twists and turns, periods of rushing rapids and peaceful pools, narrow gorges and wide valleys. At no point does the river question whether it is going in the right direction or moving at the right speed. It simply responds to each moment's conditions with complete presence and trust. This quality of trust is not blind faith, but rather a deep confidence in the fundamental intelligence and benevolence of existence itself. This intelligence that guides the river's flow is the same intelligence that orchestrates the migration of birds across thousands of miles, the blooming of flowers in perfect synchronization with the availability of pollinators, the complex dance of predator and prey that maintains ecological balance, and the intricate biochemical processes that sustain life in every cell of our bodies. This intelligence operates at scales from the subatomic to the cosmic, coordinating countless variables in ways that our human minds can barely comprehend. Cultivating trust in this larger intelligence requires us to examine and gradually release many of the beliefs and assumptions that keep us locked in patterns of anxiety, control, and resistance. We may need to question our assumption that we always know what is best for us in the long run, recognizing that our perspective is necessarily limited by our current understanding and experience. We may need to examine our belief that life is fundamentally dangerous or hostile, and that we must constantly guard against disaster and disappointment. We may need to explore our tendency to think that our happiness and fulfillment depend on specific outcomes, occurring within specific timeframes, according to our personal preferences. This belief creates enormous pressure and stress because it makes our well-being dependent on factors that are largely beyond our control. When we can find sources of peace and satisfaction that are not dependent on external circumstances unfolding according to our wishes, we become much more resilient and adaptable. As we begin to release these limiting beliefs and assumptions, we create space for a more trusting, open relationship with life to develop. We start to notice the countless ways that life supports us, guides us, and provides for us, often in ways we never could have planned or orchestrated ourselves. We begin to see synchronicities and meaningful coincidences that suggest a deeper order and intelligence operating beneath the surface of apparently random events. We may notice that the book we need falls off the shelf in front of us at exactly the right moment. The person with the information or skills we need appears in our life just when we most need their help. The opportunity we have been hoping for becomes available precisely when we are ready to take advantage of it. The financial resources we need become available through unexpected channels, just when our need is greatest. These experiences of synchronicity and support help build our confidence in life's benevolent intelligence and our trust in the perfect timing of events. We begin to understand that we are not separate from this intelligence, but are expressions of it, and that our deepest intuitions and inspirations are actually this intelligence communicating with us and through us. This growing trust in life's natural timing brings with it a profound sense of relief and relaxation. We no longer feel that we must figure everything out in advance or control every variable in our environment. We can plan and prepare while remaining flexible and open to unexpected developments. We can work toward our goals while staying present to the journey itself, rather than being fixated only on reaching our predetermined destination. The Zen masters taught that this relaxed, trusting approach to life actually makes us more effective, not less. When we are not wasting energy fighting against what is or worrying about what might be, we have more energy available for skillful action in the present moment. When we are not rigid in our expectations, we can more readily recognize and take advantage of opportunities that arise unexpectedly. When we trust in life's timing, we can act with greater confidence and clarity because we are aligned with natural forces rather than working against them. This alignment with natural forces creates a sense of flow in our lives, where actions arise naturally from the situation at hand, rather than being forced through willpower and effort alone. We begin to experience what athletes call being in the zone more frequently in our daily activities. Work becomes less effortful and more enjoyable. Relationships become more harmonious and authentic. Creative projects unfold with greater ease and inspiration. Decision-making becomes clearer and more confident. Understanding impermanence and the illusion of control represents the next crucial step in developing this foundation of inner peace. Most of our suffering stems from our attempts to make permanent what is naturally temporary, or to control what is inherently beyond our control. We cling to pleasant experiences, trying to make them last forever, and becoming anxious or depressed when they inevitably change or end. We resist painful experiences, fighting against their presence in our lives instead of understanding that they too are temporary and often carry important gifts of wisdom and growth. We worry about future events over which we have little or no influence, creating stress and anxiety about scenarios that may never occur. We regret past decisions and wish we could change what has already occurred, wasting precious energy on situations that cannot be modified. We try to control other people's behavior, emotions, and choices, creating conflict and disappointment when they do not conform to our expectations and preferences. All of these mental activities share a common thread. They are based on the illusion that we have far more control over our experience than we actually do. This illusion of control is deeply embedded in our culture and our individual psychology. From early childhood, we are taught to believe that if we just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, and make the right choices, we can ensure that our lives unfold according to our desires and preferences. While effort, planning, and wise choices certainly matter and can influence our experience significantly, the Zen masters understood that there are countless variables in any situation that remain completely beyond our control. We cannot control other people's choices and actions, though our behavior certainly influences how others respond to us. We cannot control natural disasters, economic fluctuations, political developments, or global events, though we can prepare for likely scenarios and respond skillfully when challenges arise. We cannot control the aging of our bodies, the death of loved ones, or the constant changes that characterize all existence. We cannot even fully control our own thoughts and emotions, which arise and pass away according to causes and conditions that are largely unconscious and beyond our direct manipulation. We can influence these inner phenomena through practices like meditation, therapy, and spiritual development, but we cannot control them completely. Recognizing the limits of our control is not a cause for despair, but rather a doorway to freedom and peace. When we stop wasting energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, we free up tremendous resources for engaging skillfully with what actually is within our influence. When we accept that impermanence is the fundamental nature of all experience, we can learn to enjoy pleasant moments more fully because we are not anxiously trying to make them last forever. We can also move through difficult periods with greater equanimity and resilience because we understand that they too will pass and transform into something else. This understanding does not make us passive or indifferent to our circumstances, but rather helps us respond more skillfully and effectively because we are not wasting energy on futile resistance to what cannot be changed. The Zen masters used many metaphors and analogies to illustrate this understanding of impermanence and the futility of excessive control. They spoke of thoughts and emotions as clouds passing through the sky of awareness. The sky remains unchanged whether the clouds are dark and stormy or bright and fluffy. The sky does not resist the storm clouds or cling to the beautiful ones. It simply provides the open space in which all weather patterns can arise and pass away naturally. Similarly, our essential nature remains stable and peaceful, even as various experiences move through our consciousness. We do not need to push away the storm clouds of difficult emotions or cling to the beautiful clouds of pleasant experiences. We can simply observe them with interested awareness, knowing that all clouds are temporary visitors in the vast sky of being. Another powerful metaphor the Zen masters used was that of the seasons and their eternal cycle of change and renewal. Spring always follows winter, but we cannot force spring to arrive by our impatience or worry. The flowers know when to bloom without consulting a calendar or receiving instructions from anxious gardeners. Summer naturally gives way to autumn, but we do not need to dread autumn's approach during the height of summer's beauty and abundance. Each season has its own gifts and its own purpose in the larger cycle of renewal and regeneration. Spring brings new growth and fresh possibilities. Summer provides abundance and full expression of life's creative potential. Autumn offers harvest time and the satisfaction of completed cycles. Winter provides rest, reflection, and the deep preparation necessary for the next round of growth and renewal. Similarly, the seasons of our lives each have their own value and their own lessons to offer. Even when we might prefer to remain in the comfortable warmth of summer, rather than face the stripping away and apparent dormancy that autumn and winter require. The challenges and losses we experience often serve the same function as winter in the natural world, clearing away what is no longer needed and creating space for new growth when the time is right. Understanding impermanence also helps us develop a healthier relationship with our goals and ambitions. While it remains important to have direction and purpose in our lives, we can hold our goals more lightly when we understand that everything is constantly changing and evolving. The goal that seems so important today may become irrelevant tomorrow as new circumstances arise and our understanding deepens and expands. The dream we thought we wanted may transform into something entirely different as we grow and evolve and discover new aspects of ourselves and our potential. The career path that once excited us may no longer align with our values and interests as we mature and develop different priorities. The relationship we thought would last forever may naturally complete its purpose in our lives and transform or end, making space for new forms of love and connection. This does not mean that we should abandon all goals and live without direction or intention, but rather that we can pursue our objectives with a spirit of exploration and openness, rather than rigid attachment to specific outcomes. We can work wholeheartedly toward what calls to us while remaining flexible about how our efforts manifest and what form success might ultimately take. We can be passionate about our pursuits while not deriving our entire sense of worth and identity from whether we achieve exactly what we set out to accomplish within our preferred time frame. This balanced approach allows us to maintain motivation and direction while avoiding the stress and disappointment that come from excessive attachment to particular results. The illusion of control often manifests most strongly and creates the most suffering in our relationships with other people. We may find ourselves trying to change our partners, children, friends, or colleagues, believing that if they would just behave differently, communicate better, or make different choices, we would be happier and more at peace. We may take responsibility for other people's emotions and reactions, thinking that we can and should be able to prevent them from experiencing pain, disappointment, or other difficult emotions. We may manipulate situations and conversations in an attempt to get the responses we want from others, using guilt, persuasion, or other forms of subtle coercion to influence their behavior. We may become angry or resentful when others do not respond to our efforts to help or change them, feeling frustrated that our good intentions are not appreciated or acted upon. All of these behaviors stem from the mistaken belief that we can control other people's inner experience and choices. The Zen masters taught that each person is on their own unique journey of learning and growth, with their own timing, their own lessons to learn, and their own path to follow. Our attempts to control or fix others often interfere with their natural process of development and may actually prevent them from learning the lessons they need to learn through their own direct experience. This does not mean that we become indifferent to others' well-being or that we never offer help, support, or guidance when is appropriate and requested. Rather, it means that we learn to distinguish between supportive presence and controlling interference, between offering our perspective and insisting that others adopt our viewpoint, between loving someone as they are and trying to make them into who we think they should be. When we release the illusion that we can control others, our relationships become much more peaceful, authentic, and genuinely intimate. We can love people as they are rather than as we think they should be, appreciating their unique qualities and accepting their limitations and challenges as part of their human journey. We can offer our perspective and support without being attached to whether others follow our advice or make the changes we think would be beneficial for them. We can set healthy boundaries and make choices about our own behavior without trying to change the other person's behavior to accommodate our preferences. We can experience genuine intimacy because we are relating to the real person in front of us rather than to our projection of who we think they should become or our fantasy of who they might be, if only they would change in the ways we desire. The practice of letting go of control extends to our relationship with our own inner experience as well. Many people believe that they should be able to control their thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations through willpower, positive thinking, or other mental strategies. When unwanted thoughts arise, they fight against them, trying to push them away or replace them with more acceptable thoughts. When difficult emotions emerge, they try to suppress them, distract themselves, or force themselves to feel something different. When their body experiences pain, illness, or discomfort, they become angry and resistant, treating their physical symptoms as enemies to be defeated rather than as messengers that might be carrying important information about their health and well-being. This internal struggle against our own experience creates far more suffering than the original thoughts, emotions, or sensations themselves. The Zen masters discovered that this internal resistance and struggle is like trying to fight against our own shadow or arguing with our reflection in a mirror. The more energy we put into fighting against our inner experience, the more solid and persistent it tends to become. They taught that we can learn to observe our inner experience with the same accepting awareness that we might bring to watching weather patterns or other natural phenomena. Thoughts arise and pass away like clouds forming and dissolving in the sky of consciousness. Emotions flow through us like weather systems, moving across the landscape of awareness, sometimes bringing storms and turbulence, sometimes bringing calm and clarity, but always temporary and always changing. Physical sensations change and shift, like the play of light and shadow throughout the day, constantly in flux and never remaining exactly the same from moment to moment. None of these phenomena define who we are at our deepest core, and none of them require our resistance or our attempts to control them. They are simply part of the natural flow of human experience, arising and passing away according to causes and conditions that are largely beyond our direct control. This does not mean that we become passive victims of our internal experience, or that we never take skillful action to care for our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Rather, it means that we learn to respond to our inner experience from a place of wisdom and compassion, rather than from fear and resistance. We might choose to exercise when our body feels sluggish, or to practice meditation when our mind feels scattered, or to reach out for support when our emotions feel overwhelming. But we make these choices from a place of self-care and wisdom, rather than from a desperate attempt to avoid or control natural human experiences. We treat ourselves with the same kindness and patience we would offer to a good friend who is going through a difficult time, rather than with the harsh criticism and impatience we often direct toward our own struggles and limitations. The Zen masters also taught that impermanence, rather than being something to fear or resist, is actually what makes growth, healing, and transformation possible. If everything were permanent and unchanging, we would be forever stuck in whatever conditions we currently experience. We would never be able to learn from our mistakes, heal from our wounds, develop new skills, or evolve into wiser, more compassionate versions of ourselves. It is precisely because everything is constantly changing that we can release limiting beliefs that no longer serve us, heal from past traumas and disappointments, develop new capacities and talents, and create new patterns of behavior that are more aligned with our deepest values and aspirations. The difficult period we are currently experiencing will pass, making room for new possibilities and opportunities. The limiting beliefs that have constrained our potential can be examined and released through conscious awareness and practice. The patterns of behavior that no longer serve us can be gradually transformed through patient, consistent effort and self-compassion. The relationships that have become stagnant or unhealthy can be renewed through honest communication and mutual commitment to growth, or, if necessary, they can be released with love and gratitude for what they taught us during the time they were part of our lives. This understanding of impermanence also helps us appreciate the preciousness and beauty of each moment. When we know that nothing lasts forever, we can savor the beauty of a sunset, the laughter of a child, the warmth of an embrace, or the satisfaction of meaningful work with greater depth and presence. We do not take these experiences for granted because we understand their temporary nature and their unique, unrepeatable quality. Paradoxically, by accepting impermanence, we are able to experience a kind of permanence, the permanent quality of love, awareness, and presence that remains constant, even as all forms change around us. This unchanging awareness that witnesses all change is what the Zen masters pointed to as our true nature, the aspect of ourselves that is not subject to birth and death, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. Finding peace in uncertainty and embracing the unknown represents perhaps the most challenging yet rewarding aspect of developing inner peace and spiritual maturity. Our minds are naturally inclined to seek certainty, predictability, and control as survival strategies that helped our ancestors navigate a potentially dangerous world. We want to know what will happen next, how things will turn out, and whether we will be safe and successful in our endeavors. This desire for certainty is understandable and, to some extent, adaptive. It helps us plan for the future, make reasonable preparations for likely scenarios, and avoid unnecessary risks that could threaten our well-being. However, the Zen masters recognized that absolute certainty is impossible in a world characterized by constant change and countless interconnected variables that influence outcomes in ways we cannot fully predict or control. The future is inherently uncertain because it depends on so many factors that are beyond our knowledge or control. Weather patterns, economic conditions, political developments, technological innovations, other people's choices, global events, and countless other variables all influence how events unfold in ways that even the most sophisticated computer models cannot predict with complete accuracy. Even our own preferences, abilities, and circumstances are likely to change in ways we cannot fully anticipate as we grow, learn, and encounter new experiences that shift our perspective and priorities. The career that excites us today may bore us in 5 years. The relationship that seems perfect now may evolve in unexpected directions. The goals that motivate us currently may be replaced by entirely different aspirations as our understanding of ourselves and our purpose deepens and expands. Rather than seeing this uncertainty as a problem to be solved or a threat to be defended against, the Zen masters learn to see it as the very nature of existence, not a bug in the system, but a feature that makes life interesting, creative, and full of potential. Uncertainty is what keeps life from becoming mechanical and predictable. If we knew exactly what would happen in every moment, life would lose its sense of adventure, discovery, and the joy that comes from unexpected positive developments and pleasant surprises. There would be no room for serendipity, for the magical coincidences that often lead to our most meaningful relationships and opportunities. There would be no space for creativity, innovation, or the emergence of possibilities that we never could have imagined from our current vantage point. Life would become like watching a movie we had already seen many times, knowing every plot twist and outcome in advance. Learning to find peace in uncertainty requires a fundamental shift in our relationship with the unknown. Instead of seeing uncertainty as threatening and anxiety-provoking, we can learn to see it as spacious and full of infinite possibility. Instead of trying to eliminate all unknowns from our lives through excessive planning and control, we can develop the capacity to remain calm and centered, even when we do not know what comes next. Instead of making decisions based primarily on fear of uncertain outcomes, we can learn to make choices based on our deepest values and truest aspirations, trusting that we will be able to handle whatever results from our actions with grace and wisdom. This shift does not happen overnight, and it does not mean that we never feel anxiety or concern about uncertain situations. Rather, it means that we develop the inner resources to remain grounded and responsive, even when external circumstances are unclear or changing rapidly. We learn to distinguish between reasonable preparation for likely scenarios and anxious rumination about unlikely disasters. We develop the wisdom to know when to gather more information and when to accept that we have enough information to move forward, even if we cannot predict all possible outcomes with certainty. The Zen masters taught that much of our suffering around uncertainty comes from our tendency to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios when we do not have complete information about a situation. When we do not know what will happen, our minds often default to imagining negative possibilities, rehearsing potential disasters, and preparing for the worst possible outcomes. We worry about job loss even when our employment is secure, relationship problems even when our partnerships are healthy, health issues even when we feel fine, financial difficulties even when our resources are adequate, or global catastrophes even when current conditions are stable. While some degree of concern about potential challenges is natural and can motivate appropriate preparation. Excessive worry about uncertain futures creates stress and anxiety that serve no useful purpose and often make us less effective at handling actual challenges when they do arise. One of the most effective ways to find peace in uncertainty is to develop a strong foundation of present moment awareness and mindfulness practice. When we are fully engaged with what is actually happening right now, we have less mental energy available for anxious speculation about what might happen later. The present moment, while it may contain challenges and difficulties, is almost always more manageable than the catastrophic futures our worried minds create through imagination and projection. Present moment awareness also helps us recognize that we have successfully navigated uncertainty many times before throughout our lives. Our personal history is filled with unexpected developments, both positive and negative, and we have found ways to adapt and respond to each situation as it arose. We may not have handled every challenge perfectly, but we have survived and often grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient through the process of meeting uncertainty with whatever resources we had available at the time. This recognition can give us confidence that we will be able to handle whatever uncertainties the future brings. Not because we can predict or control what will happen, but because we have proven our ability to learn, adapt, and find creative solutions when faced with unexpected circumstances. We can trust in our own resilience and resourcefulness while remaining humble about our limitations and open to seeking help and support when needed. The practice of embracing the unknown also involves cultivating what the Zen masters called don't know mind, a state of open, curious awareness that does not rush to fill uncertainty with premature conclusions, assumptions, or judgments. Don't know mind allows us to remain receptive to new information and unexpected possibilities, rather than closing down our perception based on our preconceptions about how things should unfold according to our limited understanding and past experience. When we approach uncertain situations with don't know mind, we become more creative and flexible in our responses to whatever emerges. We are more likely to notice opportunities that we might have missed if we were rigidly focused on a predetermined outcome or locked into habitual ways of thinking and responding. We are more open to input and collaboration from others because we are not invested in being right about our predictions or maintaining our image as someone who always knows what to do. We are more willing to experiment and try new approaches because we understand that uncertainty means multiple pathways remain possible, and that what works in one situation may not work in another. This experimental attitude helps us learn more quickly from our experiences and adapt our strategies based on feedback from our environment, rather than stubbornly persisting with approaches that are not producing the results we desire. This openness to the unknown also applies to our understanding of ourselves and our own potential for growth and transformation. Many people believe they know exactly who they are, what they are capable of, and what they want from life based on their past experiences and current circumstances. While self-knowledge is certainly valuable and important for making wise decisions, the Zen masters taught that excessive certainty about our identity and capabilities can become a prison that prevents growth and positive change throughout our lives. When we remain open to discovering new aspects of ourselves, we create space for positive transformation and development that might not be possible if we were locked into fixed ideas about our personality talents, and limitations. We may discover creative abilities we never knew we had, develop courage in situations that once frightened us, find compassion for people we once judged harshly, or develop interests and passions that were completely outside our previous experience. The unknown can be particularly challenging when it comes to major life transitions, such as career changes, relationship shifts, health challenges, or the death of loved ones. During these times, the familiar structures and routines that provided a sense of stability and predictability may no longer be available. We may feel lost, confused, or overwhelmed by the magnitude of uncertainty we are facing and the number of decisions we need to make without clear guidance about the best course of action. The Zen masters taught that these periods of major transition, while often uncomfortable and disorienting, are also opportunities for profound growth and renewal that would not be possible if our lives remain static and predictable. When the old patterns and structures fall away, space is created for new possibilities to emerge that we might never have discovered if we had remained in our familiar routines and comfort zones. The career that ended unexpectedly may lead to work that is more aligned with our authentic interests and values. Work that we never would have pursued if we had remained comfortable in our previous position. The relationship that concluded may make room for deeper love and connection, either with a new partner who is better suited to who we have become, or with ourselves as we learn to enjoy our own company and develop our individual interests and capabilities. The health challenge that forced us to slow down and reassess our priorities may teach us important lessons about what truly matters in life and how to live with greater presence, gratitude, and appreciation for the simple gifts that we may have taken for granted when we were focused on more ambitious pursuits. Learning to embrace the unknown during major transitions requires developing trust in our ability to adapt and find our way through unfamiliar territory, even when we cannot see the entire path ahead clearly. This trust is built gradually through successfully navigating smaller uncertainties and recognizing that we possess more resilience and resourcefulness than we often give ourselves credit for. It is also cultivated through developing a strong spiritual or philosophical framework that provides meaning and guidance even when external circumstances are unclear. This framework might include practices like meditation, prayer, or contemplation that help us connect with sources of wisdom and strength that are not dependent on external conditions. It might include relationships with mentors, teachers, or communities that provide support and perspective during challenging times. The Zen masters often use the metaphor of walking in fog to describe how to navigate uncertain situations skillfully and effectively. When we are walking in thick fog, we cannot see very far ahead, but we can usually see well enough to take the next step safely. If we focus on trying to see all the way to our destination, we become frustrated and may even become paralyzed by the lack of visibility. But if we focus on taking one careful step at a time, paying attention to the ground immediately in front of us and trusting that the path will become clearer as we move forward, we can continue making progress even in very uncertain conditions. We may need to move more slowly and carefully than we would in clear weather, but we can still reach our destination safely. This step-by-step approach to uncertainty helps us avoid becoming overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we do not know about the future. Instead of trying to figure out everything at once, we can focus on what we need to know and do right now in this moment, with the information and resources currently available to us. We can gather the information that is accessible, make the best decision we can with that information, and remain open to adjusting our course as new information becomes available and circumstances continue to evolve. This approach allows us to take effective action, even in uncertain conditions, rather than becoming paralyzed by the impossibility of knowing everything in advance. The practice of embracing the unknown also involves developing comfort with what the Zen masters called not knowing what comes next, while still caring deeply about our lives and our impact on the world. This is different from not caring what comes next or being passive and indifferent about our future. Rather, it means holding our plans and expectations lightly, remaining curious about how life will unfold rather than anxious about whether it will unfold according to our preferences and timeline. This attitude of curious openness can transform our relationship with the future from one of anxiety and attempted control to one of adventure and discovery. Instead of seeing the unknown as a threat to be defended against, we can see it as a mystery to be explored with interest and wonder. Instead of trying to eliminate all surprises from our lives through excessive planning and control, we can learn to appreciate the gifts that unexpected developments often bring. We can develop the capacity to be surprised and delighted by life, rather than constantly disappointed when reality does not match our expectations. We can cultivate appreciation for the creative intelligence that orchestrates the countless variables that influence our experience in ways that often exceed our limited imagination and planning. As we deepen our capacity to find peace in uncertainty and embrace the unknown, we often discover that some of our most meaningful and fulfilling life experiences have emerged from situations that initially felt uncertain, threatening, or completely outside our control. The job we lost led to a career we love more than we ever loved our previous work. The relationship that ended made space for deeper love and more authentic connection than we had experienced before. The illness that frightened us taught us about courage, resilience, and the preciousness of each day in ways that we could never have learned through reading books or listening to lectures. The financial setback that worried us showed us what we could actually live without and what truly matters for our happiness and well-being, freeing us from the burden of unnecessary desires and expectations. These experiences teach us that uncertainty, rather than being something to fear and avoid, is often the doorway through which life's greatest gifts and most important lessons arrive. When we can remain open and responsive to uncertainty rather than resistant and controlling, we position ourselves to receive these gifts and to participate more fully in the creative unfolding of our lives. We learn to trust not only in our ability to handle whatever comes, but in the fundamental intelligence and benevolence of existence itself. We begin to see that the same creative force that guides the growth of plants, the migration of animals, and the movement of planets is also guiding our own life's journey in ways that serve our highest good, even when we cannot understand the bigger picture from our limited human perspective. This completes the foundation of inner peace through understanding life's natural flow, recognizing the impermanence of all things and the limits of our control, and learning to find peace in uncertainty while embracing the unknown with curiosity and trust. These insights form the bedrock upon which all other spiritual understanding is built, providing us with the stability and flexibility needed to navigate life's inevitable challenges with grace, wisdom, and an open heart. Now we turn to one of the most profound and transformative aspects of Buddhist understanding, the recognition that suffering itself can become our greatest teacher and guide toward wisdom. This may seem paradoxical at first, even counterintuitive, because our natural human instinct is to avoid pain and seek pleasure, to move away from discomfort and toward what feels good and safe. Yet the Zen masters discovered something remarkable through centuries of careful observation and practice. Something that challenges our most basic assumptions about the nature of suffering and its role in our spiritual development. When we examine our lives with honest reflection, we often find that our most significant periods of growth, our deepest insights, and our most meaningful transformations have emerged not from our moments of ease and comfort, but from our encounters with difficulty, loss, disappointment, and pain. This is not to suggest that we should seek out suffering or that pain is inherently good, but rather to recognize that when suffering inevitably arises in our lives, as it does for every human being, we have a choice about how we relate to it and what we allow it to teach us. The first and most crucial understanding is that pain and suffering, while often used interchangeably in everyday language, are actually quite different phenomena. Pain is the immediate, direct experience of physical discomfort, emotional distress, or mental anguish. It is the natural response of our nervous system and psyche to injury, loss, threat, or disappointment. Pain serves as an alarm system, alerting us to situations that require our attention, care, or protective action. Without pain, we would touch hot stoves repeatedly, ignore serious injuries, and remain unaware of emotional wounds that need healing. Suffering, on the other hand, is what we add to pain through our resistance, our stories, our judgments, and our attempts to make the pain mean something about us, about others, or about the nature of life itself. Suffering is the mental and emotional elaboration we create around the basic experience of pain. It includes our resistance to what is happening, our wishes that things were different, our fears about what the pain might mean for our future, and our stories about why this is happening to us. Consider the simple example of physical injury. When we cut our finger, there is immediate pain, a clear signal from our body that something requires attention. This pain serves an important biological function, alerting us to potential damage and motivating us to care for the wound. The pain itself is usually brief and manageable, lasting only as long as the injury requires healing. But then our mind often takes over, creating layers of suffering on top of the basic pain. We might tell ourselves that we are clumsy, that we should have been more careful, that this always happens to us at the worst possible times. We might worry about infection, about scarring, about how this will affect our plans for the day or week. We might feel angry at ourselves for being careless, or frustrated that we now have to deal with bandaging and healing when we had other things we wanted to accomplish. In this way, what began as a simple, temporary physical sensation becomes a complex web of self-criticism, anxiety, frustration, and mental proliferation. The original pain might last for minutes or hours, but the suffering we create around it can persist for days, weeks, or even longer if we continue to feed it with our thoughts and emotional reactions. This same pattern plays out in every area of our lives, from minor inconveniences to major life challenges. When we lose a job, end a relationship, face illness, or confront any form of loss or disappointment, there is an initial impact, a natural grief, or distress that arises in response to the change in our circumstances. This is pain, and it is both normal and necessary. It is the heart's natural response to loss, the mind's natural response to the unexpected, the body's natural response to stress and change. But then we often compound this natural pain with layers of suffering through our resistance, our stories about what this means, our comparisons to others, our judgments about ourselves, and our fears about the future. We tell ourselves that we should not be feeling this way, that we should be stronger, more resilient, better able to handle life's challenges. We create narratives about being victims, about life being unfair, about never getting what we deserve or always losing what we value most. These mental stories and emotional reactions can transform a temporary setback into a prolonged period of misery. We might spend months or years replaying what went wrong, imagining how things could have been different, or worrying about whether similar losses will occur again. We might develop beliefs about ourselves as unlucky, unworthy, or incapable of maintaining good things in our lives. We might become suspicious of future opportunities or relationships, afraid to invest ourselves fully because we fear experiencing similar pain again. The Zen masters recognized that while we cannot always control the pain that comes into our lives, we have tremendous influence over the suffering we create around that pain. This recognition opens up an entirely different way of relating to difficult experiences, a way that transforms our relationship with adversity from one of victimhood and resistance to one of curiosity, learning, and even gratitude. When we begin to see pain as a teacher rather than an enemy, something remarkable happens. Instead of immediately trying to escape, avoid, or numb the discomfort, we can learn to turn toward it with gentle attention and compassionate awareness. We can ask ourselves what this experience might be trying to show us, what it might be inviting us to learn about ourselves, about others, or about the nature of life itself. This shift in perspective does not mean that we become masochistic or that we enjoy pain for its own sake. Rather, it means that we recognize pain as carrying information, as pointing towards something that needs our attention, care, or understanding. Just as physical pain alerts us to injury or illness in the body, emotional and psychological pain often alerts us to areas of our lives that are out of balance, to relationships that need attention, to patterns of thinking or behaving that no longer serve us, or to aspects of ourselves that we have been neglecting or suppressing. Consider the pain of loneliness, for example. On the surface, loneliness feels purely negative, something to be avoided or quickly remedied through social activity, entertainment, or distraction. Most of us have learned to fear loneliness, to see it as evidence that something is wrong with us, or that we are not lovable enough to maintain meaningful connections with others. But when we turn toward loneliness with curiosity rather than resistance, we might discover that it is pointing toward a deeper need for authentic connection, not just with others, but with ourselves. We might realize that we have been so busy maintaining relationships that look good on the surface that we have neglected the deeper work of becoming someone we genuinely enjoy being alone with. The pain of loneliness might teach us about the difference between being alone and being lonely, showing us that true connection begins with self-acceptance and self-compassion. It might reveal patterns of people, pleasing or codependency that have prevented us from forming relationships based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than on need, fear, or convenience. Loneliness can also teach us about the quality of presence we bring to our relationships. When we are afraid of being alone, we might find ourselves clinging to others in ways that actually push them away or prevent genuine intimacy from developing. We might discover that our fear of loneliness has led us to compromise our authentic selves in order to maintain connections that are not truly nourishing for anyone involved. Through this deeper examination, loneliness can become a doorway to more honest self-reflection, more authentic relationships, and a more solid sense of self-worth that does not depend entirely on external validation. It can teach us to enjoy our own company, to develop interests and activities that bring us joy independent of others, and to approach relationships from a place of wholeness rather than desperate need. Similarly, the pain of failure or disappointment, while initially uncomfortable, often carries profound teachings about our attachments, our expectations, and our sense of self-worth. When we fail at something important to us, we have an opportunity to examine whether our self-esteem has become too dependent on external achievements and recognition. We can explore whether we have been pursuing goals that truly align with our values and authentic desires, or whether we have been chasing success as defined by others. Failure can teach us about resilience, about the difference between our essential worth as human beings and our performance in any particular area. It can show us the importance of effort and intention over outcome, and help us develop a more balanced relationship with both success and failure as temporary experiences rather than permanent identities. When we examine our failures with compassionate curiosity, we often discover that they contain valuable information about our approach, our preparation, our understanding of the situation, or our readiness for particular challenges. Failure can reveal areas where we need to develop new skills, seek additional support, or adjust our strategies. It can also show us when we have been pursuing goals for the wrong reasons or trying to force outcomes that are not aligned with our authentic path. Sometimes failure teaches us about timing, showing us that we were attempting something before we had developed the necessary foundation, or before external circumstances were ready to support our efforts. Other times, failure reveals that our goals themselves needed adjustment, that what we thought we wanted was not actually what would bring us fulfillment or serve our highest good. The pain of rejection, whether in romantic relationships, friendships, or professional contexts, can be one of our most powerful teachers about self-acceptance and unconditional self-worth. When someone rejects us, our immediate response is often to assume that there is something wrong with us, that we are not good enough, attractive enough, smart enough, or worthy enough to be chosen, loved, or valued. But rejection can also teach us about compatibility, about the importance of being authentic, rather than trying to be what we think others want us to be. It can show us that not every connection is meant to develop into a deep relationship, and that this is not a reflection of our worth, but simply a matter of different needs, preferences, timing, or life circumstances. Most importantly, rejection can teach us that our sense of self-worth cannot depend on the approval or acceptance of others if we want to live with genuine confidence and inner peace. It can motivate us to develop a more solid relationship with ourselves, based on self-knowledge, self-compassion, and recognition of our inherent value as conscious beings capable of love, growth, and contribution to the world. Rejection often reveals our hidden beliefs about ourselves and our worthiness of love and acceptance. When we are rejected, we might discover that we have been carrying unconscious beliefs about not being good enough, smart enough, or lovable enough. These beliefs, which may have originated in childhood, experiences, or past relationships, can be brought into the light of conscious awareness through the pain of rejection. Once we become aware of these limiting beliefs, we can begin to question their validity and work toward developing a more accurate and compassionate understanding of ourselves. We can recognize that rejection often has more to do with compatibility, timing, and the other person's own needs and circumstances than with our fundamental worth as human beings. The Zen masters understood that every form of pain and difficulty contains within it the seeds of wisdom, compassion, and spiritual growth. This does not mean that all suffering is necessary, or that we should passively accept harmful situations without taking appropriate action. Rather, it means that when pain arises in our lives, as it inevitably will, we can choose to meet it with presence and openness, rather than resistance and avoidance. This approach requires courage, because our conditioned response to pain is to contract, to defend, to build walls around our hearts, to prevent future injury. We have learned to see vulnerability as weakness and emotional pain as something to be avoided at all costs. Our culture often reinforces these beliefs, encouraging us to numb pain through various forms of distraction, consumption, or addiction, rather than learning to be present with difficult emotions. But the Zen masters discovered that this defensive approach, while understandable, actually increases our suffering by cutting us off from the very experiences that could help us grow in wisdom, compassion, and inner strength. When we consistently avoid or numb our pain, we also diminish our capacity to experience joy, love, and deep connection with others. We become like people living behind thick walls that protect us from harm, but also prevent us from receiving the nourishment and beauty that life offers. When we learn to stay present with pain, rather than immediately trying to escape it, we develop what might be called emotional resilience or spiritual courage. We discover that we are much stronger and more capable than we previously believed, that we can survive and even thrive through experiences that once seemed overwhelming or impossible to bear. This does not happen overnight, and it does not mean that we become immune to pain or that difficult experiences stop affecting us. Rather, it means that we develop a different relationship with pain, one based on trust in our ability to learn and grow from whatever life presents to us. We begin to see challenges not as evidence that something is wrong with us or with life, but as opportunities to deepen our understanding, strengthen our character, and expand our capacity for compassion. This shift in perspective requires us to develop what the Zen masters called beginner's mind, an attitude of openness and curiosity that allows us to approach each experience, even painful ones, with fresh eyes rather than predetermined judgments about what it means or how we should respond. Beginner's mind helps us remain receptive to the teachings that difficult experiences offer, rather than immediately categorizing them as purely negative and something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when we begin to see pain as teacher is that we stop taking our difficulties so personally. We begin to recognize that pain and loss are universal human experiences, not punishments or signs of personal failure. Everyone experiences heartbreak, disappointment, illness, aging, and ultimately death. Everyone faces uncertainty, makes mistakes, and encounters situations beyond their control. This recognition naturally gives rise to compassion, both for ourselves and for others. When we understand that our struggles are part of the shared human experience rather than evidence of our individual inadequacy, we can extend the same kindness and understanding to ourselves that we would offer to a good friend facing similar challenges. We also develop greater empathy for others who are suffering, recognizing in their pain echoes of our own experiences and understanding that their reactions, even when they seem unreasonable or difficult, often arise from the same fears, hurts, and unmet needs that we have experienced ourselves. This understanding can transform our relationships, allowing us to respond to others' pain with compassion rather than judgment, patience rather than irritation, and support rather than criticism. The practice of seeing pain as teacher also helps us develop what the Zen masters called equanimity, a balanced state of mind that remains stable and peaceful even in the midst of changing circumstances. Equanimity is not indifference or emotional numbness, but rather a deep acceptance of life's inevitable ups and downs, combined with confidence in our ability to respond skillfully to whatever arises. When we have equanimity, we do not become overly elated by success or overly devastated by failure. We do not cling desperately to pleasant experiences or push away unpleasant ones with panic or aggression. Instead, we maintain a steady, compassionate awareness that allows us to respond to each situation with wisdom and appropriate action rather than reactive emotion. This balanced approach to life's challenges does not mean that we become passive or resigned. Rather, it means that we can take appropriate action to address problems and improve our circumstances without being driven by anxiety, anger, or desperation. We can work toward positive change while simultaneously accepting the reality of our current situation and the uncertainty of outcomes. The Zen masters taught that this balance between acceptance and action is one of the most important skills we can develop. It allows us to engage fully with life while maintaining inner peace, to care deeply about outcomes while not being attached to them, and to work diligently toward our goals while remaining open to different possibilities and unexpected developments. As we deepen our practice of learning from pain and difficulty, we begin to notice that our relationship with all of life's experiences starts to change. We become less reactive and more responsive, less driven by unconscious patterns and more guided by conscious choice. We develop what might be called wisdom, the ability to see situations clearly without the distortion of excessive emotion or mental proliferation, and to respond in ways that serve our highest good and the good of others. This wisdom is not intellectual knowledge that we can acquire through reading or study, though these can certainly support our understanding. Rather, it is experiential knowledge that arises from our willingness to stay present with life as it actually is, including its painful and difficult aspects, rather than constantly trying to escape into fantasies about how life should be or could be different. The transformation of suffering into wisdom is perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of human consciousness. It demonstrates our capacity to find meaning, growth, and even beauty in experiences that initially seem purely negative or destructive. This capacity is not unique to spiritual practitioners or exceptionally strong individuals, but is available to anyone willing to approach their pain with curiosity, courage, and compassion. This transformation does not happen automatically simply because we experience pain. It requires conscious intention, gentle persistence, and often the support of others who have walked similar paths. It asks us to develop new habits of mind and heart, to question our assumptions about what creates happiness and security, and to remain open to learning, even when we feel overwhelmed or discouraged. Now we turn to explore one of the most challenging and liberating practices in all of Buddhist understanding, the cultivation of non-attachment and the art of letting go. This practice builds naturally upon our recognition of pain as teacher, because it is often our attachment to people, outcomes, and experiences that creates much of our suffering when circumstances inevitably change. Non-attachment is perhaps one of the most misunderstood concepts in spiritual practice, often confused with detachment, indifference, or emotional withdrawal. Many people, when first encountering teachings about non-attachment, worry that they are being asked to stop caring about anything or anyone, to become cold and disconnected from life's joys and sorrows, or to adopt an attitude of resigned passivity toward their circumstances. This misunderstanding arises from our tendency to confuse attachment with love, caring, or engagement. We assume that if we are not attached to someone or something, we must not truly love or value them. But the Zen masters discovered something quite different through their careful observation of the mind and heart. They found that attachment, rather than being an expression of love, is often what prevents us from loving freely and fully. To understand this distinction, we must first examine what attachment actually means in the context of spiritual practice. Attachment is not the same as preference, appreciation, or even deep love. Rather, attachment is the mental and emotional clinging that arises when we believe that our happiness, security, or sense of self depends on having, keeping, or controlling particular people, experiences, or outcomes. When we are attached to something, we experience anxiety about losing it, jealousy when others have what we want, and desperation when it seems to be slipping away. We may find ourselves manipulating situations or people to maintain our sense of control, or becoming angry and resentful when things do not go according to our plans and expectations. Attachment often reveals itself through the intensity of our emotional reactions to potential or actual loss. When we are attached, the mere thought of losing something or someone can trigger panic, rage, or despair that seems disproportionate to the actual situation. We might find ourselves checking compulsively on what we fear losing, creating elaborate backup plans to prevent loss, or becoming possessive and controlling in our relationships. Consider the difference between loving someone and being attached to them. When we love someone without attachment, we care deeply about their well-being, we enjoy their company, and we feel genuine affection and appreciation for who they are. At the same time, we recognize that they are independent beings with their own path, their own lessons to learn, and their own choices to make. We support their growth and happiness, even when their choices take them in directions we would not have chosen for them. This kind of love allows the other person freedom to be themselves, to make mistakes, to change and grow, and even to choose relationships or life paths that do not include us. We can feel sadness if they move away, or if the relationship changes, but we do not feel that our world is ending or that we cannot be happy without them. We wish them well and remain open to whatever form our connection might take in the future. When we are attached to someone, our caring becomes mixed with possessiveness, control, and fear. We may say we love them, but our behavior reveals that we are more concerned with how they make us feel, how they meet our needs, or how their presence in our lives supports our sense of identity and security. We may try to change them to better fit our expectations, become jealous of their other relationships, or feel threatened when they grow and change in ways that challenge our familiar patterns of relating. Attachment in relationships often manifests as attempts to control the other person's behavior, choices, or even thoughts and feelings. We might use guilt, manipulation, or emotional blackmail to keep them close or to prevent them from making decisions we disapprove of. We might monitor their activities, become suspicious of their friendships, or demand constant reassurance of their commitment to us. This distinction becomes even clearer when we examine our relationship with our own achievements, possessions, and life circumstances. We can work diligently toward goals and deeply appreciate success without being attached to specific outcomes. We can enjoy material comforts and beautiful experiences without believing that our happiness depends on maintaining them indefinitely. When we are not attached to outcomes, we can put forth our best effort while remaining open to different possibilities. We can appreciate what we have while it is present without living in constant fear of losing it. We can adapt more easily to changing circumstances because our sense of self and our capacity for contentment are not dependent on external conditions remaining static. For example, we might work very hard to build a successful business, pouring our energy and creativity into making it thrive. Without attachment, we can be deeply engaged in this work and genuinely pleased when it succeeds, while also remaining open to the possibility that market conditions, economic changes, or other factors beyond our control might require us to adapt our approach or even pursue different opportunities. With attachment, the same business becomes not just a source of income or creative expression, but the foundation of our identity and self-worth. We might become so identified with our role as a successful business owner that any threat to the business feels like a threat to our very existence. We might refuse to consider necessary changes or become paralyzed by fear of failure, actually making the business less likely to succeed because we cannot respond flexibly to changing conditions. The practice of non-attachment does not mean that we stop having preferences or that we become indifferent to outcomes. Rather, it means that we hold our preferences lightly, like water cupped in our hands, rather than ice frozen in our grip. We can prefer certain outcomes while accepting that we cannot control all the factors that influence results. We can work toward goals while remaining open to learning and growth regardless of whether we achieve exactly what we initially intended. This practice requires us to examine some of our deepest beliefs about what creates happiness and security. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that happiness comes from getting what we want and keeping what we have, while suffering comes from not getting what we want or losing what we already possess. The Zen masters discovered that this formula, while containing some truth, is incomplete and ultimately unreliable as a foundation for well-being. They observed that even when we get exactly what we think we want, our happiness is often temporary and mixed with new anxieties about maintaining our good fortune. The promotion we worked so hard to achieve brings new responsibilities and pressures. The relationship we longed for creates new vulnerabilities and dependencies. The financial security we sought generates new worries about investment, taxation, and economic uncertainty. This phenomenon, sometimes called the hedonic treadmill, reveals that external circumstances alone cannot provide lasting happiness or security. We adapt quickly to positive changes in our circumstances and and what once brought us joy becomes the new normal baseline from which we seek further improvements. Meanwhile, we develop new fears about losing what we have gained, creating a cycle of striving and anxiety that can persist regardless of how much we achieve or acquire. Meanwhile, experiences that initially seem purely negative often lead to unexpected growth, opportunity, and insight. The job loss that devastated us opens doors to career paths we never would have considered. The illness that frightened us teaches us about resilience and shows us what truly matters in life. The relationship that ended painfully creates space for deeper self, understanding, and more authentic connections. This does not mean that all outcomes are equally desirable or that we should not work toward positive change in our lives. Rather, it suggests that our happiness and peace of mind are more dependent on our internal response to circumstances than on the circumstances themselves. When we can remain centered and responsive regardless of external conditions, we discover a source of well-being that cannot be threatened by changing situations. The practice of letting go is closely related to non-attachment, but focuses more specifically on our relationship with the past and our resistance to change. Letting go involves releasing our grip on experiences, relationships, identities, and expectations that no longer serve us, even when part of us wants to hold on to them for reasons of familiarity, comfort, or fear of the unknown. Many of us carry burdens from the past that we have never fully released. We may hold on to resentment toward people who hurt us, regret about mistakes we made, or grief about losses we experienced years or even decades ago. While it is natural and healthy to feel these emotions when difficult experiences first occur, problems arise when we continue to carry them long after the original situation has ended. Holding on to resentment is like carrying hot coals in our hands with the intention of throwing them at someone else. The person we resent may be completely unaware of our feelings or may have moved on with their life, while we continue to burn ourselves with anger and bitterness. Our resentment does not punish them or change the past, but it does poison our present experience and limit our capacity for joy, trust, and open-hearted engagement with life. Resentment often becomes a familiar companion, something we return to when we feel hurt or vulnerable. It can provide a sense of righteous indignation that temporarily makes us feel powerful or justified. But this feeling comes at the cost of our peace of mind and emotional freedom. The energy we spend maintaining resentment is energy that could be directed toward healing, growth, and creating positive change in our current circumstances. Similarly, holding on to regret about past mistakes keeps us trapped in a painful loop of self-criticism and wishful thinking. We replay scenarios in our minds, imagining how things could have been different if only we had made better choices. But this mental time travel prevents us from learning from our experiences and applying that learning to present circumstances. It keeps our energy focused on unchangeable past events rather than on current opportunities for growth and positive action. Regret can become a form of self-punishment that we inflict as if somehow our suffering could undo past mistakes or prove that we are good people who feel appropriately bad about our errors. But this self-torture serves no constructive purpose and often prevents us from making amends or taking positive action in the present that could address the consequences of our past choices. Letting go of grief and loss is perhaps the most delicate aspect of this practice, because grief is a natural and necessary response to losing someone or something important to us. The goal is not to stop feeling sad about losses or to pretend that they do not matter. Rather, it is to allow our grief to flow through us naturally without becoming stuck in patterns of denial, bargaining, or chronic despair that prevent us from healing and moving forward. Healthy grief honors what we have lost, while gradually opening us to new possibilities and connections. It allows us to carry the love and lessons from past relationships into future experiences without being so focused on what is gone that we cannot appreciate what is present or what might yet come. Complicated grief, on the other hand, keeps us frozen in time, unable to integrate our loss into the larger story of our lives. We might idealize what we have lost, making it impossible for anything new to measure up to our memories. We might feel guilty about experiencing moments of happiness or connection, as if moving forward somehow betrays or diminishes what we have lost. The process of letting go often requires us to confront our fundamental beliefs about fairness, control, and the nature of life itself. We may need to release the belief that life should be fair, that good people should not suffer, or that we can prevent all loss and disappointment through careful planning and good behavior. These beliefs, while understandable, often create more suffering than the original difficulties they attempt to address. The belief that life should be fair can keep us stuck in anger and resentment when we encounter situations that seem unjust. While it is important to work, creating more fairness and justice in the world, our personal peace and well-being cannot depend on life always being fair to us. Accepting that life includes both joy and sorrow, gain and loss, success and failure, allows us to navigate challenges with greater resilience and wisdom. When we truly let go, we do not necessarily forget what happened or stop caring about people and situations from our past. Rather, we release the emotional charge around these experiences, allowing them to become part of our history without continuing to dominate our present emotional landscape. We can remember without ruminating, acknowledge without obsessing, and learn without remaining stuck in patterns of blame or self-recrimination. This process of letting go creates space in our hearts and minds for new experiences, relationships, and possibilities. When we are not constantly carrying the weight of past hurts and disappointments, we have more energy available for engaging with present opportunities and challenges. We become more available to the people in our lives now, rather than being distracted by ghosts from the past. The Zen masters taught that letting go is not something we do once and then forget about, but rather an ongoing practice that we return to again and again as new attachments and resistances arise. Each day brings opportunities to practice releasing our grip on outcomes, expectations, and the need to control how situations unfold. This practice can be as simple as noticing when we feel tense or anxious about something and asking ourselves what we might be clinging to or resisting. Often, we discover that we are attached to having things happen in a particular way or within a specific time frame, or we are resisting some aspect of our current reality that we cannot immediately change. In these moments, we can practice the gentle art of opening our hands and our hearts, metaphorically releasing our grip on how we think things should be and allowing space for how they actually are. This does not mean becoming passive or giving up on positive change, but rather approaching our circumstances with curiosity and flexibility, rather than rigid demand and desperate control. One of the most profound aspects of developing non-attachment and the ability to let go is that it actually enhances rather than diminishes our capacity for love, joy, and meaningful engagement with life. When we are not constantly worried about losing what we have or not getting what we want, we can be more fully present with whatever is actually happening. We can appreciate beauty without needing to possess it, love people without needing to control them, and pursue goals without being devastated if outcomes differ from our expectations. This freedom allows us to take appropriate risks, to be vulnerable in relationships, to try new things, and to embrace change as a natural part of life rather than something to be feared and avoided. We become more resilient and adaptable, better able to navigate life's inevitable uncertainties and transitions with grace and wisdom rather than panic and resistance. When we are not attached to maintaining a particular image of ourselves or our lives, we can be more honest about our mistakes, more open to feedback, and more willing to change course when our current approach is not working. We can admit when we do not know something, ask for help when we need it, and acknowledge our limitations without feeling that this diminishes our worth as human beings. The practice of non-attachment also naturally leads to greater compassion for ourselves and others. When we recognize that everyone is struggling with their own attachments and resistances, their own fears of loss and desires for control, we can respond to difficult behavior with understanding rather than judgment. We recognize that people often act in harmful ways, not because they are inherently bad, but because they are suffering and do not know more skillful ways to meet their needs or handle their pain. This compassionate understanding extends to our own mistakes and limitations as well. We can acknowledge our attachments and resistances without harsh self-criticism, recognizing them as natural human tendencies that we are learning to work with rather than character flaws that define our worth. This self-compassion creates a foundation of inner stability and kindness that supports all of our other spiritual practices and relationships. As we continue to explore the transformation of suffering into wisdom, we discover that compassion naturally arises from our growing understanding of the universal nature of human struggle and the interconnectedness of all beings. When we truly comprehend that everyone is doing their best to find happiness and avoid suffering, even when their methods seem misguided or harmful, our hearts naturally open with empathy and care. This compassion begins with ourselves, because we cannot genuinely offer to others what we do not possess internally. Many of us have been conditioned to be our own harshest critics, holding ourselves to impossible standards and treating our mistakes and limitations with a severity that we would never direct toward a friend or loved one facing similar challenges. Self-compassion involves learning to speak to ourselves with the same kindness, understanding, and encouragement that we would offer to someone we care about who is struggling. It means recognizing that making mistakes, having limitations, and facing difficulties are part of the shared human experience rather than evidence of personal failure or inadequacy. When we practice self-compassion, we do not excuse harmful behavior or avoid taking responsibility for our actions. Rather, we create an internal environment of safety and support that actually makes it easier to acknowledge our mistakes, learn from them, and make positive changes. When we are not constantly defending against self-attack, we have more energy available for growth, creativity, and service to others. Self-compassion also involves recognizing the difference between self-care and selfishness. Many people, especially those who have been taught to prioritize others needs above their own, struggle with guilt when they take time for rest, enjoyment, or activities that nourish their own well-being. They worry that attending to their own needs makes them selfish or uncaring toward others. But the Zen masters understood that genuine compassion for others flows naturally from a foundation of self-acceptance and self-care. When we are depleted, resentful, or running on empty, our efforts to help others often come from obligation rather than genuine care, and may actually create more burden than benefit for everyone involved. This self-compassion naturally extends outward to encompass others, as we recognize that they too are struggling with the same fundamental challenges that we face. Everyone wants to be happy and free from suffering, but most people have learned imperfect strategies for achieving these goals. Understanding this allows us to respond to difficult behavior with curiosity about what pain or need might be driving it, rather than immediately reacting with judgment or retaliation. When someone is rude, demanding, or inconsiderate, instead of immediately assuming they are a bad person or taking their behavior personally, we can wonder what might be happening in their life that is causing them to act this way. Are they stressed, afraid, hurt, or overwhelmed? Are they lacking skills for more effective communication? Are they repeating patterns they learned in childhood that once helped them survive, but now create problems in their relationships? This compassionate curiosity does not mean that we excuse harmful behavior or fail to set appropriate boundaries. Rather, it means that we can address problems and protect ourselves while maintaining an open heart toward the person involved. We can say no to unreasonable requests, leave situations that are not healthy for us, and stand up for ourselves and others without adding hatred or revenge to an already difficult situation. Compassion does not mean that we become doormats or that we fail to set appropriate boundaries with people whose behavior is harmful. Rather, it means that we can take care of ourselves and address problems from a place of clarity and care rather than anger and revenge. We can say no to requests that we cannot fulfill, leave relationships that are not healthy, and protect ourselves from harm while still maintaining an open heart toward the people involved. This balance between compassion and wisdom, between kindness and discernment, is one of the most important skills we can develop as we mature in our understanding of how to live skillfully in a complex world. It allows us to engage with life's challenges from a place of strength and stability rather than reactivity and fear, and to contribute to healing and positive change, rather than adding to the cycle of harm and retaliation that characterizes so much of human interaction. Developing this balance requires practice and patience with ourselves as we learn to navigate the sometimes confusing territory between enabling harmful behavior and responding with compassionate firmness. We might make mistakes, being too permissive in some situations and too harsh in others, but each experience teaches us more about how to respond skillfully to the complex realities of human relationships. Through this deep understanding of suffering as teacher, the practice of non-attachment and letting go, and the cultivation of compassion for ourselves and others, we transform our entire relationship with life's inevitable difficulties. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles to our happiness, we begin to recognize them as opportunities for growth, learning, and the development of wisdom and compassion. This shift in perspective is perhaps the most profound transformation that human consciousness can undergo, opening us to a way of living that is both deeply peaceful and fully engaged with the richness and complexity of human experience, we discover that it is possible to care deeply while holding lightly, to love fully while remaining free, and to engage completely with life while maintaining inner peace. This transformation does not happen overnight, nor does it mean that we never again feel pain, disappointment, or loss. Rather, it means that we develop a different relationship with these inevitable aspects of human existence, seeing them as part of the full spectrum of life, rather than as evidence that something has gone wrong. When we have integrated these teachings into our daily experience, we find that we can navigate life's ups and downs with greater equanimity and grace. We become sources of stability and wisdom for others who are struggling, not because we have all the answers or never face difficulties, but because we have learned to meet whatever arises with presence, compassion, and trust in our ability to learn and grow from every experience. This is the profound gift that the Zen masters offer us through their understanding of suffering as teacher, the practice of non-attachment, and the cultivation of compassion. They show us that it is possible to transform our relationship with pain and difficulty from one of victimhood and resistance to one of wisdom, growth, and service to all beings. The journey toward living with presence begins with understanding what mindful awareness truly means in our daily lives. When the Zen masters speak of mindfulness, they are not referring to a technique we practice for 20 minutes each morning and then forget about for the rest of the day. Rather, they point us toward a fundamental shift in how we relate to each moment of our existence, a way of being that transforms ordinary activities into opportunities for awakening and peace. This transformation begins with recognizing how disconnected we have become from the simple reality of our immediate experience. In our modern world, we have developed an extraordinary capacity for mental multitasking that keeps us constantly divided between what is happening now and our endless stream of thoughts about the past and future. We eat breakfast while planning our day, drive to work while rehearsing conversations, and spend time with loved ones while mentally reviewing our to-do lists. Mindful awareness is the practice of bringing our full attention to whatever is happening right now, without judgment, without trying to change it, and without getting lost in stories about what it means or what should happen next. This sounds simple, but in our culture of constant distraction and endless mental commentary, it represents a radical departure from our habitual way of moving through the world. The Zen masters understand that our minds have been conditioned to treat the present moment as merely a stepping stone to somewhere else we think we need to be. We rush through our actual experience in pursuit of future moments that we believe will finally bring us the satisfaction, security, or happiness we seek. This creates a tragic irony where we spend our entire lives waiting for life to begin, missing the extraordinary richness that is always available right where we are. Consider how we typically experience something as basic as drinking a cup of tea. Most of the time, we are not really present with the tea at all. We might be thinking about our schedule for the day, replaying a conversation from yesterday, or planning what we will say in an upcoming meeting. The actual experience of the warm cup in our hands, the steam rising from the surface, the aroma filling our nostrils, and the taste touching our tongue happens almost entirely without our conscious participation. We have become so habituated to this divided attention that we barely notice how much of life we are missing. We go through entire days, weeks, even years operating on autopilot, responding to life from our conditioned patterns and assumptions, rather than from fresh awareness and genuine presence. This creates a subtle but persistent sense of emptiness and disconnection, as if we are living our lives from behind a veil that separates us from the immediacy and vitality of direct experience. The Zen masters invite us to discover what becomes possible when we bring our full presence to this simple act of drinking tea. When we truly pay attention to drinking tea, we discover that this ordinary moment contains extraordinary richness. We notice the weight of the cup, the temperature against our palms, the way the liquid moves across our tongue, the subtle flavors that emerge and fade. We might notice our breathing naturally slowing down, our shoulders relaxing, our mind becoming quieter and more settled. This shift in attention reveals something profound about the nature of satisfaction and fulfillment. We discover that the peace and contentment we have been seeking in future achievements, acquisitions, or experiences is actually available right now in the simple act of being fully present with whatever is happening. The tea does not need to be special tea. The moment does not need to be a special moment, and we do not need to be in a special state of mind. The richness emerges naturally when we stop rushing through our experience and allow ourselves to actually receive what is being offered. This is not about making tea drinking into something special or sacred, but rather about recognizing the inherent completeness and richness that exists in every moment when we are truly present with it. The Zen masters understand that presence is not something we need to create or achieve, but rather something we need to stop obscuring with our constant mental activity and distraction. The practice begins with learning to notice when we are not present. This awareness itself is a form of mindfulness. We might catch ourselves eating a meal without tasting it, walking without feeling our feet on the ground, or listening to someone speak while our minds are somewhere else entirely. Rather than judging ourselves for these moments of inattention, we can simply notice them with curiosity and gently return our awareness to what is actually happening right now. The practice of mindful awareness extends far beyond formal meditation or conscious moments of presence. It becomes a way of approaching every aspect of our daily lives with curiosity, openness, and attention. When we wash dishes, we can feel the warm water on our hands, notice the texture of the soap, observe the way the light reflects off the wet surfaces. We might discover that this simple activity, which we usually rush through as quickly as possible, contains its own form of meditation and peace. When we walk from one room to another, instead of using this time to mentally rehearse our next activity, we can feel our feet touching the ground, notice our breathing, observe the quality of light in the space around us. These moments of transition, which we usually treat as empty time to be filled with thinking, become opportunities to reconnect with our immediate experience and return to presence. This shift toward present moment awareness has profound effects on our overall well-being and our relationships with others. When we are truly present, we naturally become more patient, more compassionate, and more responsive to what is actually needed in each situation. Instead of reacting automatically from our habitual patterns and assumptions, we create space to perceive more clearly and respond more wisely. The Zen masters teach that most of our suffering comes from our tendency to live in our thoughts about life rather than in life itself. We spend enormous amounts of energy reliving the past, analyzing what went wrong, imagining how things could have been different, and creating elaborate stories about what our experiences mean about us and our worth. We project into the future, creating scenarios of what might happen, planning for contingencies that may never arise, and building castles of hope or towers of anxiety in our minds. While thinking certainly has its place and serves important functions, when it becomes our primary mode of experiencing life, we miss the actual richness and immediacy of what is happening right now. We become like people watching a movie of life rather than actually living it, observers of our own experience rather than full participants in the unfolding mystery of each moment. Present moment living does not mean we never think about the future or learn from the past. Rather, it means we develop the capacity to engage with thoughts and planning when they are useful and appropriate, while also being able to return our attention to the immediate reality of our present experience. We learn to distinguish between productive thinking that serves our well-being and the lives of others, and the endless mental spinning that creates anxiety, regret, and disconnection from life. This distinction is crucial for developing a healthy relationship with our mental activity. The Zen masters recognize that thinking is a powerful tool that can serve wisdom and compassion when used skillfully. We need to plan for practical necessities, learn from past experiences, and use our analytical abilities to solve problems and make decisions. The issue is not thinking itself, but our unconscious identification with a stream of mental activity that keeps us trapped in a virtual reality of concepts and interpretations. One of the most transformative aspects of mindful awareness is how it changes our relationship with difficult emotions and challenging situations. When we are caught up in our thoughts about a problem, we often make the situation much more complicated and stressful than it needs to be. We add layers of interpretation, judgment, and projection that multiply our suffering and cloud our ability to see clearly what is actually happening and what response might be most helpful. For example, when we experience rejection or criticism, our minds often immediately begin creating stories about what this means about our worth, our future prospects, or how others perceive us. We might replay the situation obsessively, imagining different responses we could have given, or projecting worst-case scenarios about the consequences. This mental elaboration transforms a single difficult moment into an ongoing source of suffering that can persist for days, weeks, or even years. When we bring mindful awareness to difficult emotions, we discover that the emotions themselves are not as solid or permanent as they appear when we are identified with them. Anger, sadness, fear, and anxiety are all energetic experiences that arise and pass away naturally when we neither suppress them nor get lost in the stories that usually accompany them. By learning to observe these emotions with curiosity and compassion, rather than resistance or identification, we develop the capacity to remain present and responsive even in challenging circumstances. This does not mean we become emotionally numb or detached from our feelings. Rather, we learn to feel our emotions fully while maintaining enough space and perspective to avoid being completely overwhelmed by them. We discover that we can experience anger without becoming an angry person, feel sadness without identifying ourselves as victims, and encounter fear without being paralyzed by anxiety about the future. The Zen masters often use the metaphor of weather to help us understand this relationship with emotions and mental states. Just as clouds pass through the sky without fundamentally altering the sky itself, our emotions, and thoughts pass through our awareness without fundamentally altering our essential nature. When we identify ourselves as the sky rather than as the weather, we can remain peaceful and stable even when storms of emotion or difficulty move through our experience. This metaphor points to a profound truth about human consciousness. Beneath all our changing thoughts, emotions, and circumstances lies a fundamental awareness that remains constant and unshaken. This awareness is not affected by what it observes, just as a mirror is not changed by the images it reflects. When we learn to rest in this deeper dimension of ourselves, we find a source of peace and stability that does not depend on external conditions or internal states. This understanding transforms how we approach conflict and challenges in our relationships and daily lives. Instead of being overwhelmed by strong emotions or immediately reacting from our triggered states, we can learn to pause, breathe, and observe what is actually happening, both within us and in the situation around us. This creates space for wisdom and compassion to inform our responses, rather than being driven by automatic reactions based on past conditioning. The practice of pausing becomes one of the most powerful tools in our mindfulness toolkit. When we feel ourselves becoming reactive or overwhelmed, we can take a conscious breath and create a moment of space before responding. This simple act interrupts the automatic chain of stimulus and reaction that usually governs our behavior and opens up the possibility for a more conscious and skillful response. In this pause, we can ask ourselves what is actually happening right now, what we are feeling in our bodies, what emotions are present, and what response would be most helpful for everyone involved. We might discover that our initial impulse to defend, attack, or withdraw is not the wisest choice, and that a more patient, curious, or compassionate response would better serve the situation. Mindful awareness also reveals the interconnected nature of all experience. When we pay close attention to any moment, we begin to see how everything is connected to everything else. The cup of tea we are drinking connects us to the earth, where the tea plants grew, the rain that nourished them, the people who harvested and processed the leaves, the sun that provided energy for photosynthesis, and the countless conditions that made this simple moment possible. This recognition of interdependence is not merely an intellectual understanding, but a direct perception that arises naturally when we are truly present. We begin to see that nothing exists in isolation, that every moment of our experience is supported by a vast web of relationships and conditions extending infinitely in all directions through space and time. This understanding naturally gives rise to gratitude and a sense of belonging to the larger web of life. When we truly perceive our interconnectedness, many of our habitual concerns and anxieties begin to seem less solid and compelling. The sense of being a separate, isolated individual struggling against a hostile world gives way to a recognition of our fundamental unity with all existence. This does not mean we lose our individuality or personal responsibility, but rather that we understand our individual lives as unique expressions of the same universal consciousness that animates all beings. As we deepen our practice of present moment awareness, we begin to discover that ordinary moments contain extraordinary depth and richness when we are truly available to them. A conversation with a friend becomes an opportunity to practice deep listening and authentic presence. Instead of waiting for our turn to speak or mentally preparing our responses, we can give our full attention to understanding and receiving what our friend is sharing with us. This quality of presence is one of the greatest gifts we can offer to another person. When someone feels truly seen and heard by us, it creates a space for deeper intimacy and connection than is possible when we are only partially present. We discover that being fully present with others is not only beneficial for them, but also deeply nourishing for us, as it connects us to the fundamental human need for authentic relationship and mutual understanding. Walking in nature becomes a meditation on beauty and impermanence when we bring mindful awareness to our outdoor experiences. Instead of using our time in nature to think about other things or to get exercise while our minds are elsewhere, we can open our senses to the sights, sounds, smells and textures around us. We might notice the play of light through leaves, the sound of wind in the trees, the feeling of earth beneath our feet, or the intricate patterns in bark, stones, and flowers. This kind of attention to natural beauty has a profound effect on our nervous system and overall well-being. The Zen masters understand that human beings have an innate connection to the natural world that gets obscured by our urban lifestyles and constant mental activity. When we reconnect with nature through mindful presence, we remember our place in the larger ecosystem of life and experience a deep sense of belonging and peace. Even routine activities like preparing meals or organizing our living spaces become opportunities to cultivate mindfulness and appreciation when we approach them with present moment awareness. Cooking can become a meditation on nourishment, gratitude, and the transformation of simple ingredients into something that sustains and delights us. We can feel the textures of vegetables as we chop them, notice the aromas that arise as we cook, and appreciate the colors and patterns that emerge as we prepare food with attention and care. Cleaning and organizing our homes can become expressions of respect for our living environment and practices of creating beauty and order in our immediate surroundings. Instead of rushing through these tasks as quickly as possible, we can approach them as opportunities to create sacred space and to practice the kind of attention and care that we want to bring to all aspects of our lives. The Zen masters emphasize that this transformation of ordinary life through mindful awareness is not about becoming someone different or achieving some special state of consciousness. Rather, it is about removing the barriers that prevent us from experiencing the natural peace, joy, and connection that are always available in the present moment. We discover that we do not need to go anywhere or become anything other than what we already are to experience profound fulfillment and peace. This understanding is both liberating and challenging. It is liberating because it means that the happiness and peace we seek are not dependent on changing our external circumstances or achieving particular goals. It is challenging because it asks us to take responsibility for our own experience and to recognize that our suffering often comes from our own mental habits and patterns of attention, rather than from external conditions. The practice of mindful awareness gradually reveals that most of our dissatisfaction comes from wanting our experience to be different from what it is. We spend enormous amounts of energy resisting what is happening and trying to make reality conform to our preferences and expectations. This resistance creates a constant state of tension and struggle that prevents us from receiving the gifts and lessons that each moment offers. This leads us naturally into understanding how these principles of mindful awareness can be integrated into the practical aspects of daily living through what the Zen masters call right action and ethical conduct. Living with presence is not just about inner awareness, and personal peace, but about how we express that awareness through our choices, behaviors, and interactions with the world around us. The concept of right action in the Zen tradition is not about following a rigid set of rules or moral commandments, but rather about allowing our actions to flow naturally from wisdom, compassion, and clear seeing. When we are truly present and connected to our deepest understanding, we naturally act in ways that benefit ourselves and others without needing to force ourselves to be good or constantly monitor our behavior for moral correctness. This organic approach to ethics recognizes that true morality cannot be imposed from the outside, but must emerge from inner understanding and care for the well-being of all life. When we see clearly how our actions affect ourselves and others, when we feel our deep connection to all beings, and when we understand the consequences of our choices, we naturally choose to act in ways that create harmony rather than discord, healing rather than harm. Right action emerges from right understanding, and right understanding comes from the direct experience of our interconnectedness with all life. When we truly see that there is no fundamental separation between ourselves and others, that our well-being is intimately connected to the well-being of everyone and everything around us, then acting with kindness, honesty, and consideration becomes as natural as breathing. This does not mean that right action is always easy or that we never face difficult choices. The Zen masters acknowledge that life often presents us with complex situations where the most compassionate response is not immediately obvious. In these moments, the practice is to remain present with the uncertainty, to listen deeply to our wisdom and intuition, and to act from our best understanding while remaining open to learning and adjusting our approach as new information becomes available. The willingness to remain present with uncertainty and complexity is itself a form of wisdom. Our minds often want to rush toward quick solutions or to reduce complex situations to simple formulas that we can apply automatically. But the Zen masters teach us that real wisdom often requires us to sit with not knowing, to tolerate ambiguity, and to trust that clarity will emerge when we maintain presence and openness rather than forcing premature conclusions. One of the key aspects of integrating mindful awareness into daily action is learning to recognize and work skillfully with our habitual patterns and conditioning. Most of us have developed automatic ways of responding to certain situations that may have served us at some point in our lives, but no longer reflect our deepest values or serve our highest good. Through mindful awareness, we can begin to notice these patterns as they arise and create space to choose more conscious responses. For example, we might notice that we have a tendency to become defensive when we receive feedback or criticism, even when it is offered with good intentions. This defensive reaction might have developed as a way to protect ourselves from harsh judgment or rejection in the past, but it now prevents us from learning and growing from the insights others offer us. Through mindful awareness, we can observe this defensive reaction arising without immediately acting on it. We can pause, breathe, and ask ourselves what response would be most helpful in this situation, both for our own growth and for maintaining positive relationships with others. This process of conscious choice making extends to all areas of our lives, from how we spend our time and energy to how we consume resources and interact with the natural environment. The Zen masters teach that every action, no matter how small, is an opportunity to express our understanding and values. the way we speak to a cashier at the store, how we drive in traffic, whether we choose to buy products that align with our values, how we treat our belongings and living spaces, all become expressions of our spiritual practice and opportunities to cultivate wisdom and compassion. This understanding transforms mundane activities into meaningful practices. When we approach each interaction and decision as an opportunity to embody our highest understanding, our entire life becomes a form of spiritual practice. We do not need to retreat to a monastery or spend hours in formal meditation to live a spiritual life. We can find the sacred in the ordinary and use every moment as an opportunity to deepen our wisdom and compassion. The practice of right speech is particularly important in our daily interactions with others. The Zen masters emphasize that our words have tremendous power to create harmony or discord, to heal or to harm, to bring clarity or confusion. Words can build bridges of understanding between people or create walls of separation and misunderstanding. They can inspire and encourage or discourage and demoralize. They can reveal truth or obscure it, promote peace or incite conflict. Mindful speech involves not only being truthful and kind in what we say, but also considering whether what we are about to say is necessary, helpful, and appropriate to the situation. Before speaking, we can pause and ask ourselves whether our words will contribute to greater understanding, whether they come from a place of genuine care or from ego and reactivity, and whether they are likely to promote harmony or create unnecessary conflict. This does not mean we become overly cautious or lose our spontaneity in communication. Rather, we develop a natural sensitivity to the impact of our words and learn to speak from a place of presence and consideration rather than from unconscious habit or emotional reactivity. We learn to listen more deeply to others, to pause before responding when we feel triggered, and to speak in ways that promote understanding and connection rather than division and conflict. Deep listening is perhaps even more important than skillful speaking. When we truly listen to others with our full presence and attention, we create a space for them to feel heard and understood. This kind of listening goes beyond waiting for our turn to speak or mentally preparing our responses. It involves giving our complete attention to understanding not just the words someone is saying, but the feelings, needs, and experiences they are trying to communicate. This quality of presence and attention is itself a form of love and respect that can transform our relationships. When people feel truly heard by us, they are more likely to open up, to share authentically, and to listen to us in return. This creates a positive cycle of mutual understanding and respect that deepens intimacy and reduces conflict in our relationships. Right speech also includes how we speak to ourselves in our internal dialogue. Many of us have developed harsh and critical inner voices that constantly judge our performance, appearance, and worth. This internal criticism creates a constant background of stress and self-doubt that undermines our confidence and well-being. The Zen masters invite us to bring the same kindness and mindfulness to our self-talk that we would offer to a beloved friend. We can learn to notice when our inner dialogue becomes negative or destructive and gently redirect it toward more supportive and realistic perspectives. This does not mean we become unrealistic about our limitations or stop trying to improve ourselves. Rather, we learn to approach our growth and development from a place of self-compassion rather than self-attack, recognizing that harsh criticism is rarely an effective motivator for positive change. The integration of mindful awareness into our work lives represents another important area of practice. Whether we work in an office, care for children, run a business, or engage in any other form of productive activity, we can approach our work as an opportunity to practice presence, service, and the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. This might involve bringing greater attention and care to the quality of our work, treating colleagues and customers with respect and kindness, making ethical choices in business dealings, and finding ways to contribute positively to our workplace culture. It also involves maintaining balance and not allowing work to consume all of our time and energy at the expense of our health, relationships, and spiritual development. The Zen masters teach that there is dignity and value in all honest work when it is approached with the right attitude and intention. Whether we are cleaning floors or performing surgery, teaching children or managing a corporation, the opportunity to serve others and express our care and attention is always present. The key is to approach our work with presence and integrity, rather than just going through the motions or working solely for external rewards. This approach to work can transform even routine or challenging jobs into opportunities for spiritual practice and personal growth. When we bring mindfulness to our work activities, we often discover aspects of our jobs that we had not noticed before. We might find satisfaction in doing tasks well, appreciate the opportunity to interact with different people, or recognize how our work contributes to the larger web of human activity and mutual support. The Zen masters teach that there is no separation between spiritual practice and daily life. Every moment offers an opportunity to practice mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. The goal is not to escape from the world into some transcendent realm, but to bring awakened awareness into every aspect of our human experience, transforming ordinary life into an expression of our deepest understanding and values. This integration requires patience and persistence, as it involves gradually changing deeply ingrained habits of attention and response that have been developing throughout our entire lives. We should not expect to transform our patterns overnight or to maintain perfect mindfulness in all situations. The practice is about gradually increasing our capacity for presence and conscious choice making, celebrating small improvements rather than demanding perfection from ourselves. As we develop greater skill in integrating mindful awareness into daily action, we begin to experience a natural harmony between our inner life and outer expression. Our actions become more spontaneous and effortless, while also being more conscious and intentional. We find that we can engage fully with the practical demands of life, while maintaining inner peace and connection to our spiritual understanding. This integration also affects our relationships in profound ways. When we approach our interactions with others from a place of presence and genuine care, we create space for deeper connection and more authentic communication. We become better listeners, more patient partners, and more supportive friends and family members. We learn to see beyond surface appearances and personality conflicts to recognize the essential humanity and inherent worth in everyone we encounter. The practice of mindful awareness in relationships involves learning to be present with others without trying to fix, change, or control them. This is often challenging because we may have strong opinions about how others should behave or what choices they should make. We may feel frustrated when people we care about make decisions that seem harmful or unwise. The practice is to offer our love and support while respecting others' autonomy and their own journey of growth and learning. We develop the capacity to offer our full attention and genuine care while respecting others' boundaries and their right to make their own choices, even when we disagree with those choices. We learn to express our needs and boundaries clearly, while also being responsive to the needs and boundaries of others. This creates relationships based on mutual respect, rather than attempts to control or manipulate each other. This balanced approach to relationships reduces conflict and increases mutual understanding and respect. We become less reactive to others' moods and behaviors, less likely to take things personally, and more able to respond from wisdom and compassion rather than from our own triggered emotions or defensive patterns. We learn to see conflicts as opportunities for greater understanding rather than as threats to be defended against. The Zen masters also emphasize the importance of cultivating gratitude and appreciation as fundamental aspects of living with presence. When we are truly present, we naturally notice the countless gifts and blessings that surround us in every moment. The air we breathe, the food that nourishes us, the shelter that protects us, the relationships that support us, the beauty of the natural world, and the miracle of consciousness itself all become sources of wonder and gratitude when we pay attention. This cultivation of gratitude is not about forcing ourselves to feel thankful or denying the reality of difficulties and challenges in our lives. Rather, it is about developing the capacity to recognize and appreciate the positive aspects of our experience, even when we are also dealing with problems or pain. This balanced perspective helps us maintain emotional equilibrium and prevents us from becoming overwhelmed by temporary difficulties. Gratitude practice also connects us more deeply to our interdependence with all life. When we truly appreciate the countless beings and conditions that make our lives possible, we naturally feel more connected to the larger web of existence and more motivated to contribute positively to the well-being of others and the health of our planet. Regular gratitude practice can be as simple as taking a few moments each day to mentally acknowledge the things we appreciate in our lives. We might notice the taste of our morning coffee, the warmth of sunlight through a window, the smile of a friend, or the comfort of our bed at the end of the day. This practice gradually shifts our attention away from what is lacking or problematic in our lives toward what is abundant and beautiful. As we continue to deepen our understanding and practice of living with presence, we begin to discover that this way of being has effects that extend far beyond our personal experience. When we embody mindful awareness, compassion, and wisdom in our daily lives, we become sources of peace and stability for others. Our presence itself becomes a gift to everyone we encounter, creating ripples of positive influence that extend in ways we may never fully know. People are naturally drawn to those who embody genuine presence and peace. When we are truly present with others, not lost in our own mental activity or emotional reactivity, we create a space where others can relax and be more authentic themselves. Our calm presence can help diffuse tense situations. Our genuine interest can help others feel valued and understood. And our patient acceptance can provide a safe space for others to explore their own thoughts and feelings. The Zen masters teach that this is one of the most profound ways we can serve the world. By doing our own inner work and learning to live with greater presence and wisdom, we contribute to the collective awakening of human consciousness. We become part of the solution to the suffering and confusion that plague our world, not through grand gestures or heroic actions, but but through the simple and profound practice of being fully present and awake in each moment of our lives. This understanding brings us to the recognition that spiritual practice is not separate from social responsibility and engagement with the challenges facing our world. The same mindful awareness that brings peace to our personal lives also enables us to see more clearly the suffering and injustice around us, and to respond with greater wisdom and effectiveness. When we are grounded in present moment awareness, we are less likely to be overwhelmed by the enormity of global problems or to become paralyzed by despair about the state of the world. Instead, we can see clearly what is within our sphere of influence and take appropriate action, while accepting what is beyond our control. We can engage with difficult issues from a place of inner stability rather than from anxiety or reactivity. The Zen masters remind us that changing the world begins with changing ourselves, not because we should be self-centered or ignore the suffering of others, but because we cannot give what we do not have. If we want to bring peace to the world, we must first cultivate peace within ourselves. If we want to create more compassion and understanding in our communities, we must first develop these qualities in our own hearts and minds. This does not mean we wait until we are perfectly enlightened before we engage with the world's problems. Rather, we engage with whatever level of wisdom and compassion we have currently developed, while continuing to deepen our practice and understanding. We act from our best current understanding while remaining open to learning and growth. The integration of inner development and outer service creates a powerful synergy that benefits both ourselves and the world around us. Our service to others becomes a form of spiritual practice that deepens our understanding and compassion, while our inner development enhances our capacity to serve effectively and sustainably without burning out or becoming overwhelmed. This approach to service recognizes that sustainable social change requires not just good intentions and hard work, but also the inner resources of wisdom, compassion, and resilience that come from spiritual practice. When we try to serve others from a place of ego, anger, or burnout, our efforts often create more problems than they solve. But when we serve from a place of genuine presence and care, our actions naturally contribute to healing and positive transformation. As we near the completion of our exploration of these profound teachings, it becomes clear that the Zen masters offer us a complete path for transforming our relationship with life itself. Through understanding life's natural flow and learning to trust its timing, through transforming suffering into wisdom via the path of acceptance, and through living with presence by integrating mindful awareness into every aspect of our daily experience, we discover a way of being that is both deeply peaceful and fully engaged with the richness and complexity of human existence. The journey we have explored together reveals that awakening is not about escaping from life or transcending our humanity, but about discovering the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the mundane, and the infinite within the finite. We learn that peace is not the absence of challenge or difficulty, but the presence of wisdom, compassion, and acceptance in the face of whatever life brings us. This understanding transforms our entire relationship with existence. We no longer see ourselves as victims of circumstances beyond our control, nor do we exhaust ourselves trying to force life to conform to our limited perspectives and desires. Instead, we learn to dance with life, to respond creatively and compassionately to whatever arises, and to find meaning and purpose in the very act of conscious, loving participation in the unfolding mystery of existence. The Zen masters show us that it is possible to live with an open heart in a world that often seems harsh and unpredictable. They demonstrate that we can maintain inner peace while caring deeply about the welfare of others, that we can accept what is while working skillfully for positive change, and that we can embrace the full spectrum of human experience while remaining grounded in our essential nature. This is not a philosophy of passive resignation or spiritual bypassing that ignores real problems and injustices. Rather, it is a way of engaging with life that is both deeply accepting and actively compassionate. We learn to respond to difficulties with wisdom rather than reactivity, to work for change from love rather than anger, and to maintain hope and determination even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Perhaps most importantly, these teachings reveal that the transformation they point toward is not reserved for special people or extraordinary circumstances. Every person has the capacity to awaken to greater presence, wisdom, and compassion. Every moment offers an opportunity to practice these principles and deepen our understanding. Every challenge can become a teacher, every relationship an opportunity for growth, and every ordinary activity a doorway to greater awareness and peace. The path outlined by the Zen masters is both simple and profound, both accessible and transformative. It requires no special beliefs, no complex rituals, and no extraordinary abilities. It asks only that we pay attention to what is actually happening in our lives, that we meet our experience with openness and curiosity, rather than resistance and judgment, and that we allow our natural wisdom and compassion to guide our responses to whatever we encounter. This simplicity is both the strength and the challenge of these teachings. Because they are so simple, we might initially underestimate their power or look for something more complicated and exotic. Because they are so accessible, we might assume they are easy to practice consistently. But the Zen masters understand that the most profound truths are often the simplest ones, and that what appears easy in theory can be quite challenging to embody fully in the complexity of daily life. As we integrate these teachings into our daily lives, we discover that the peace and fulfillment we have been seeking was never somewhere else waiting to be found. It has always been available in the present moment, obscured only by our habitual patterns of thinking and reacting that keep us disconnected from the richness and completeness of what is actually here. This recognition can be both liberating and humbling. It is liberating because it means we do not need to wait for external circumstances to change or for future achievements to bring us happiness. It is humbling because it asks us to take responsibility for our own experience and to recognize that much of our suffering has been created through our resistance to what is and our attachment to what we think should be. The Zen masters remind us that this recognition is both the beginning and the end of the spiritual journey. It is the beginning because it opens us to a lifetime of deepening practice and understanding. It is the end because it reveals that what we have been seeking has never been absent from our experience. We need not become someone different or go somewhere else to find peace, joy, and connection. We need only learn to recognize and embody what we already are. This understanding transforms everything while changing nothing. We continue to live our ordinary lives, face the same practical challenges, and navigate the same relationships and responsibilities. Yet our relationship to all of this is fundamentally altered. we discover that it is possible to be fully human while also being awake, to care deeply while holding lightly, and to engage completely with life while maintaining inner freedom and peace. The gift that the Zen masters offer us is not a set of techniques or beliefs, but a way of being that reveals the extraordinary nature of ordinary existence. They show us that awakening is not about achieving some special state or having mystical experiences, but about recognizing the miracle that is already present in each moment of our lives. Through their wisdom and example, we learn that the path to peace does not lead away from the world, but deeper into it, not away from our humanity, but into its fullest expression, not away from our relationships and responsibilities, but into a more conscious and compassionate engagement with all aspects of life. As we conclude this exploration, we carry with us not just intellectual understanding, but practical tools and perspectives that can transform our daily experience. We have learned to see life as a river that carries us toward our highest good. When we learn to trust its flow, we have discovered how to transform suffering into wisdom through the practices of acceptance, non-attachment, and compassion. We have explored how to live with presence through mindful awareness and ethical action that expresses our deepest understanding and values. These are not merely concepts to contemplate, but living principles to embody. They invite us into a way of being that brings greater peace to ourselves and contributes to the healing and awakening of our world. Each moment offers a fresh opportunity to practice these teachings, to deepen our understanding, and to express more fully the wisdom and compassion that are our birthright as conscious beings. The Zen masters leave us with the understanding that the journey toward awakening is both deeply personal and inherently connected to the well-being of all life. As we transform our own relationship with existence, we contribute to the transformation of human consciousness itself. As we learn to live with greater presence and wisdom, we become part of the healing that our world so desperately needs. This is the profound gift and responsibility that comes with understanding these teachings. We are called not just to find peace for ourselves, but to embody that peace in ways that serve the awakening and well-being of all beings. In doing so, we discover that our individual liberation and the liberation of all life are not separate goals, but different expressions of the same fundamental recognition of our interconnectedness and shared destiny. The path continues with each breath, each step, each choice we make. The Zen masters have shown us the way, but we must walk it ourselves, bringing our own unique gifts and perspectives to the timeless wisdom they have preserved and transmitted. In this way, the ancient teachings remain alive and relevant, continuing to offer guidance and inspiration to each new generation of seekers who yearn for greater peace, wisdom, and compassion in their lives and in the world.